Hey there! Thanks for joining us at Flipside Frolic, where we learn to understand each other's perspectives by flipping the script and having some fun. Here we go.
All right, we're live. So welcome, Andy Nathan. It's been a while, that's for sure. Initially, we met. You were doing some social media stuff, doing some network things on, I believe it was probably meetup.com or something along those lines that maybe initially we did. It's kind of funny. I dug this out so we can have you sign your book.
Oh my lord! I actually have one or two copies left of this, but
if you really wanted it, you can have it.
No,
obviously,
it's okay. You can have it. I have my own version of it left, so
we could have you. I can have the signed copy from published author Andy Nathan here in the Marketing Experience.
You even have the date when you bought it.
See that?
That's kind of funny.
Yeah. One of the things that we did was I helped contribute to one of the chapters in the book through my story, which was pretty amazing back in the day. You guys heard it a little bit with overcoming obstacles and different things that Andy was working on at the time. And at that time, I was off of work because of my work injury, so I had a little extra time to dive down marketing and some networking things and some computer skill things and websites and blogging and social media and all these different things because I wasn't sure if I was ever going to return to work. So I was just, checking out other avenues or whatever. But
you did.
I did. Yeah, fortunately, I did get back to work, or whatever, however you want to. It was in the cards that I was going back to work. But all those skills that I learned over all that time obviously helped with trying to get some of these things rolling. So you just kind of feel your calling and feel what feels right. And the main thing for me with this podcast is really just reconnect with people, just catch up, see what's going on, what they've been up to, how the kids doing, all that kind of stuff. And it's just a great way to connect with people that you haven't seen in a while. And I just feel like, we're all here to help each other in some way. And sometimes it's just so serendipitous how you run into somebody and then something comes up and then there's some contact or whatever. And the whole magic of networking is what a lot of your experience is about. So, but yeah, so what you've been up to?
10 years ago or 12 years ago.
Probably.
That's a lot. So I had my digital marketing agency for a few years. So when we talked, I think I was just starting to do trainings because that was probably near the beginning, and I did trainings and I also did a lot of services for a number of years. And probably about 2016, 2017, I had the opportunity to get one of those fun things called a job.
Nice.
You've heard of those, right?
Yes, I do. Unfortunately, I've too much experience with them.
Yes. So I sorry, hold on. Getting over some stuff, so my apologies.
It's all good.
So I essentially made the transition because I was, at that time, I had actually gone through a divorce, so I'd been married the first time and didn't work out. A lot of things, I'm not going to go into that, but took a job because I just, I figured there was an opportunity there to play around with HubSpot, to start going to some conferences, to get some real learning, and I worked there for about a year. I learned a lot. It was a big corporate environment, and I didn't even know what a stakeholder was until I started working there, because why would you know that when you're working with small businesses? And they were very much, you have to involve all the stakeholders, and they wanted me to create 20 landing pages, and I said, well, what happens when I'm done in a month with those landing pages? And at a large corporation, the time to spend on that, I think I finished 2 landing pages in 1 year. Because it was so ridiculous how much time it took and how many people you had to get involved. So left there, went to a digital marketing agency that was a little bit smaller, was more my speed. Unfortunately, they lost some clients and they had to let me go. I did some copywriting for them. Then worked for a nonprofit, had some transitions, and then started working with the tech company I was with for about 5 years. I left them at the end of last year. And it was interesting because at every company I learned a little bit more. But I definitely felt like at the end, I just I had left mortgages initially. So I was a mortgage broker and real estate investor, and I got caught up in 2008 and everything that happened. And that was a lot of fun, losing all your properties and all your money going away. And then I remember getting, I had 2 commissions, and this is what made me leave the industry. I had 2 commissions. I got 1 commission for a job that took me 3 months. It was a client. I finished the mortgage. It took me 3 months to finish. And there was an error that was like on the processing side. I can't remember what it was because this is so long ago. And I made like $7 on the commission. And I'm just like, cause you're a 1099, so you're not a W-2 employee. So I made $7 on something that took me 3 to 6 months. That should have been a $6,000, $8,000 commission. And I said, if that ever happens again, I'm leaving.
Mm-hmm.
In about 6 months, a year later, because I had information that if I do deals in Indiana, I could get a full 5% on the commission on smaller deals, which was a big deal in Indiana because a lot of times Indiana, it's a $50,000 purchase, and they were saying you could get 5%. Apparently, that's the rule there. And this is the instructor who did the certification course for the mortgages. And apparently they were wrong. I don't get that amount. I get whatever's left after processing. So I made $1.75. So I said, this is nuts. I'm leaving. And, like all the stuff going on, everything else, I left. I kind of, like I said, I lost some properties. I tried to get some of it back. I ended up having to short sale a property in Florida, which ended up not being as bad as I would have imagined, but it was just the property was losing $1,000 a month because it had gone from cash flowing 100, and then the rents just bombed in 2008, 2009. So all of a sudden, the $100 in cash flow went down to like negative $600-700, and then in addition to that, the association was losing money because all the other people were leaving. So they said, we're putting on a special assessment just to tack on to this.
Right.
So then it's like, I can't pay $1,000 a month on a property I'm not living on. That's supposed to be an investment. And it went from $200,000 in value to $50,000 in value. I short sailed that property. Ended up figuring out a way, and this, you can't even do this anymore, by the way. Sorry, this is all, might be getting way into the weeds. But
No, it's cool.
When I short sailed the property in 2011, and when I short sailed the property, I had asked my CPA, what can I do to avoid the taxes? Because there's a $150,000 tax bill on this. And then it's like, well, you can you could do a bankruptcy. And I'm like, so I went to go see a bankruptcy attorney. He said, you can't do a bankruptcy because the way I'd purchased another property made it impossible for me to do that without wrapping up other people in that bankruptcy. So I'm like, okay. So I started researching it, and I found out that you could declare yourself insolvent if you have no money, which was really great because, they wiped out all my money. So they wiped out all my money. So I said, I'm insolvent. And it was the last year an investor could actually declare themselves insolvent on a loss for a foreclosure. So I declared myself insolvent. So I ended up walking away from a $150,000 loss on a $200,000 property. And I think I had to end up paying like a few $1,000s and some fees, and that was about it.
Nice.
So
that doesn't sound too dissimilar from some of my experiences, because 2008 was the same kind of thing for me. I had we had first got married. I bought a house in Chicago. It was $326,000, and the idea was it was a smaller house. Well, I had plans drawn up for a second story addition. We're gonna remodel this house, do a second story addition, flip it, make some money, buy something bigger, and just start that whole process of doing some work on the side while you're, all that kind of thing. And 2008, we bought right at the peak. So a year later, It was $150,000 upside down.
And at one point I was thinking about moving down to Florida just because I'm like, maybe if I live there, but I'm like, even if I live there, I'm still upside down.
Yeah. Obviously, having rentals out of state is a challenge in itself, no question. And to build the relationships it takes to have people that you can trust, because everybody wants $1,000 a day to do anything. So it's impossible to make a profit if everybody's making a ton of money. So it's a challenge.
It was $1,000 a month. Sorry, I just want to make sure I'm clear. Did I say $1,000 a day?
I'm just saying tradesmen nowadays are pretty much looking for about $1,000 a day, regardless of what they're doing, whether it's carpenters hanging doors or whatever. It's amazing.
Yeah.
How everybody's worth is higher than,
COVID definitely inflated a lot of stuff.
Yes.
So, I mean, I'm not saying that they're not worth it.
No doubt.
I mean, we have guys who are getting a little bit less than that, but I mean, there's definitely some increased value. Like, we were working on a rehab when COVID happened, and I'm pretty sure that increased the cost of the rehab by about 20,000.
Just COVID, you mean?
Yeah, COVID. Actually, I think we saved some because even though I am not the greatest handyman in the world, that's why I have my guys. That's why if they were over there, you heard me talking to them earlier. Mm-hmm. I was the one who was painting this. One of our rental houses, I primed and painted pretty much the entire house just because. You're
trying to save a little.
We needed to save something.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it was a rental property, so I did a pretty good job. I would not hire out my services professionally.
Well, painters is one of those trades too that they definitely are at the top level of price points sometimes, but to do it right is so time consuming if they're really patching and they're really doing all that prep work, and then it seems like they paint the walls in a day, and it's like, they're getting a lot of money for one day of work, but if there's 3 days of prep work or whatever, and that's what really makes it turn out nice. But then if somebody else is coming in and trying to charge the market rate, and then they just come and don't do any prep work, well, then obviously they don't deserve that top dollar, So.
I once replaced the bathroom tile in a house I was living in. This is years ago. I wouldn't do it anymore just because I'm smart enough to know I shouldn't be doing it. Because I watch my guys and they... You okay?
Yeah.
I watch my guys and I know they know what they're doing. I mean, when I was getting rid of some subway tile, and it took me like a week or two just to get rid of this. I mean, I wasn't doing it every day, but it's like you're chipping away, and I'm like, how do you get this faster? And I'm like, I couldn't figure out what to do. And I talked to the guys, and we just go like that, and they're just done. And I'm like, oh yeah, but they go so fast when you do it, and it's like they can get it done in 2 to 3 days, no matter what they're doing, because they know what they're doing.
Right.
For me, it took me 3 weeks to do it, but you know what? It was for a house I was living in. It was a second bathroom. It was okay. I got it done. But, I wouldn't say do it again. I mean, I definitely made mistakes in there. And there was definitely a creak in the floor at one point because I kind of was low on concrete at the end.
Yeah.
So
that obviously the ability to know exactly like how hard you can hit things without creating extra damage that's going to cause more work later, and all those fine lines, and that's what experience is about. Yeah. I've done quite a jack of all trades, master of none. So I've done a lot of construction. Right now, my bathroom down here, this whole basement has been remodeled, and I did almost everything.
Okay.
So I did the drywall, I did the painting, I did.
Sorry, I'm looking now.
Yeah, now you could look. I did the flooring, and right
some
now,
nice LVP.
Yeah, there's a few seams separating, so I'm gonna have to address that with the little 2-sided tape and a little bit of clear silicone to tap them together and hold them together or whatnot. But the bathroom right now, the shower is Durarocked but not tiled.
Okay.
So it's the same story that I know I can do it. I've done it before, and it's just like it's just going to take me 3 times as long and maybe not turn out as great.
Yeah.
But then that's the aggravating thing is sometimes then you bring in a professional, and sometimes the end product is like, well, I could have done that. Like if it's not great, you know what I mean? Okay. And sometimes attention to detail, and like our upstairs bathroom, there's like just some of those little details that sometimes matter and sometimes don't matter, but maybe you would like it this way and not that way. Like there's one spot that it just like kind of you pointed out. One thing you have to be careful with, folks, is like, if you're doing work and then you have that one little thing that you screwed up, nobody else is ever going to see it until you point it out. And that just, it kind of just happened earlier with us in a little detail. But then you'll always see it, right? Yeah. So you're not trying to hide things from the customer when you made a mistake. You're not trying to deceive them by not telling them about it. But if you don't tell them about it, they'll never notice it. And So there's a fine line between screwing yourself by trying to be honest.
Yeah.
And creating an unsatisfied customer. So, like, one example is we have the stainless steel edging for the tile in the bathroom upstairs, and they brought that down to the top of the molding.
Okay.
And it's like, it just looks unfinished. Like, I would have just multi-tooled out that molding and ran that down to the ground.
Okay.
And then it just would have looked a little bit better. And so when you see things like that, and then you're sitting on the toilet or whatever, and you're staring at it, and you're just like, I paid these guys, and then, this is how they do things or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
And if I'm at work, so it's like either I'm going to be working or I'm going to be doing it. But if I'm going to take off of work to babysit somebody else doing the job, that's pretty annoying too. But you almost have to be there these days. It's bizarre.
Well, that's why we have. We have one of the guys that works with us. He's there to check out the projects. It's not that the guys aren't going to do the work. We just need to make sure everything's done in the right time. Make sure that we don't catch stuff. And one of the things that was happening was we had the property you heard me talking about earlier. We were working on that earlier, and all of a sudden he came in on a Monday, and on Friday everything was fine, and on Monday it was 37 degrees, 38 degrees, and as it's December, January. I can't remember if it was which one it was. It was right around the beginning of the month, end of the last month, and we called the owner, and we told him, hey, look, there's some problems here, and he had his own HVAC guy go out and take a look, and we're like, well, that's fine. You might need to have him come out again. We took a look. I mean, the guys took a look at this stuff to see if they could fix it, but I mean, they're not HVAC specialists. They're the guys who are doing the tiling and stuff like that. They were actually doing the tiling, which is part of the reason why they need the heat. Because, when you're tiling stuff for the bathroom, when you're doing the grout, you need it to be hot. Because otherwise, I mean, you don't want it to be steaming in the house, but, you need it to be 60, 70 degrees so it could dry off.
Right.
If it's 38 degrees, it'll take 3-4 days to dry off. And that's not good for anybody. So we called them. We went through everything. All of a sudden, we discovered at the end of the day, apparently when he set up the People's Gas, he thought everything was set up on automatic payment, and it wasn't. It's
okay.
like, so we spent the entire day trying to figure out what to do. So, and then the guys were working in like 38-degree weather, which sucked.
Cool. We're gonna pause for one quick second because I might be having a little techno issue here. Hold on a second.
No problem. Products with that. Now, I don't think she gets her salary from that, but I know she gets a few $1,000s every month from doing these essential oils, and that's basically what you're talking about. It's she has people underneath her, and she trains them how to do that. Now, my wife isn't active, so she just gets a few. We get enough to basically pay for our essential oils every month. It's not, but we're not spending time on this.
Yeah.
So, but we'll buy some stuff every month. It does help. It's good stuff to have, but at the same point, it's like she makes some extra. She supplements her income from that, but she spends a lot of time on that. Now, is she wealthy and can she retire next week from that? Heck no.
Right.
But she still makes enough that it's helping her to supplement so she can live the type of life she wants to live. And, she has 2 kids. One's going off to, I don't think they're going to go off to college or do something else next year. And then the other one's 15. So, like, for her, she'll have more freedom to do that afterwards. So it's like she really wants to just grow that business. And that, for her, that makes a lot of sense. And there's a lot of people like that who you could use that to supplement your income. There's nothing wrong with network marketing. I personally have never really found one that fit what I wanted to do.
Right.
That's the biggest problem. Like, I tried Amway, and I was looking at, they were, what did they call themselves at one point? Because they were Amway, then they were not Amway, then they were Amway again. There was a name they called themselves in between.
Yeah.
And I can't remember the name of what they called themselves.
Yeah, I remember Amway was so popular.
It was...
They tried to rebrand, and that didn't really work, so they went back to the original or whatever.
Yeah. So this is before they went back to the original. So I had taken a look at them, and I had asked them 2 questions. I said, look, because I was already in digital marketing. I said, if I'm doing this, I'm promoting this every day on social media. Is that okay? They said yes.
No. Oh, okay.
So the guy who brought me in said yes.
Yeah.
Then I saw the contract, and it said, no, you
absolutely
can only do it in
not.
local market.
Right. And the main reason for that is because compliance and FCC regulations and all these different things, it was too much to try to school everybody on what you could and couldn't say, because you cannot offer a promise and you can't falsify income, and you have to have disclosures, and there's all these rules that could get the company in trouble because you're an affiliate of that company. So it was easier to just say you can't use social media.
But my entire plan was to use social, because even at that point, like I said, I had a few thousand people on social media, and I'm like, okay, great, maybe I could just start meeting those people and start talking to them, because even on Facebook, I had 4,000 to 5,000 people at that point. So I'm talking about friends, not followers on a fan page.
Right.
So that was one thing, and then the second thing what I said was like, look, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to reach out to people in my network who are investors who are probably more likely to do something like this. But then I'm going to be honest with you, I'm going to go back and then I'm going to talk to about joining like Legal Shield in a few years or something else.
Right.
Because like if I'm doing this, I'm going to have them join another network. And apparently that was a big no-no.
Yeah. They didn't want you doing multiple streams. And it was like just any financial advisor or anybody that's out there would tell you, don't put all your eggs in one basket and have multiple streams of income. That's the smart thing to do. But of course, they want all your time dedicated to their company. So there were different companies. There was another. My experience with it was initially there was one of my past guests was doing some work with a vitamin supplement company, and so COVID hit, or not. I'm sorry, not COVID. The housing crisis hit 2008 or whenever it was, and I was they were. I was just like, I don't think I can sell a $150 a month vitamin habit right now because everybody's kind of hurting, you know what I mean? Yeah. And then the company ended up closing, which happens often. So there goes your residual income and you screw all your people in a sense, but, stuff happens. And then they kind of got merged in with a coffee company that was called, what was it, Organo Gold. They were. I remember that, Organo Gold. Yeah, they were selling a coffee that was infused with a Ganoderma mushroom that was supposedly an oxygenator and had a health benefit. And so it was like, well, look, I can sell $1 cup of coffee. When you're looking at Starbucks at the time being $5 a cup and all this other stuff. And so we played around with that a little bit. So we did do a lot of research and different team setups with the legs and how the compensation plans work and how to balance that out in the best way. So we did a lot of research on that, and then we ended up going into I ended up going into another one that was through an educational platform for blogging and marketing. If you remember, I was doing Empower Network for a little while, which was interesting. Now, they screwed the whole industry up by offering 100% compensation plan, which people were like, that's got to be a scam. You can't do that. There's no way the company would be in business. But what their plan was that your first sale was 100% commission. And you have to buy the product in order to sell the product. So you got your money back if you sold one. Yeah. And now you were even, which is kind of crazy. And then the company would get the next two, and then you would get the third, the fifth. So you'd get 100% on like the third, the fifth, the eighth, something like that. But it was still, if you sold a $1,500 training course and you get a $1,500 commission, that seems like you're making some pretty good money.
Yeah, I think I remember talking to some people at Empower. It seemed decent. I mean,
it was actually decent to the point that everything we do is trading. When you just define what money is, right? What is money? You're trading your dollars for value, right? Or perceived value even, or even potential value. So whether it's a real estate investment program where they're teaching you how to buy houses and flip them and all these other things, again, it's not a scam. You're getting new information. Maybe you could find all that information for free on YouTube, right? So if you know what to search for. But sometimes you don't know what you don't know. So if you were to set up a program where everything is step-by-step easy for you to follow and understand and learn all these things you didn't even know you didn't know, then potentially you could make some money, right? So they can justify selling you a $15,000 course because after your first flip and you make 20 grand, you're even. But most of the people that get into things like that don't do the work and don't take the action and don't follow the suggestions, or they start thinking they're smarter, and so they start changing things their way. And if you really have a lot of experience in the market, then that's fine. you might be able to interject some of your personal experiences to make it your own and to do well with it.
Yeah.
But most of the time, it's like, you don't know. You're broke. So why don't you just follow the plan? And there's a lot of truth to that's probably the right thing. Just follow suggestions and learn. And then you can implement your own things later.
There's also, there's two parts of that. One, as someone who's an experienced investor, I have trouble going to a lot of those things because it's too basic for me. And
for sure.
It's like, it's hard to go back that far in terms of some of the stuff they talk about. So it's like, I'm debating like maybe at the end of this year, do we go to Bigger Pockets? But at the same point, I don't want to hear 15 different stories of this is my story and we're going to inspire you. No, I want to actually hear what's your cool strategy and give me that now. Give that up front. Because if I have to listen to 20 of those, I'm going to go nuts. Same thing with, but like at the flip side of it, one of the things that's interesting is that, like, some of these courses, they're right. They have great ideas. But I've had some where I was an agent a few years ago, and I'm still a licensed agent. I should clarify that just for record.
Yeah.
Everything else.
Disclosure.
Yeah.
Full disclosure.
Full disclosure. I'm a licensed agent, so I'm saying this as an agent. So
real estate agent, not FBI agent or anything. Okay.
That'd be kind of cool though. Can I say I'm like a CIA agent just for the fun of it?
Yes, he might be a secret
agent, man.
Chinese spy real estate investor that's buying up all our property.
Yeah, who's Jewish. Yeah. The cool thing was that I took this investor around, and she wanted to flip a property, and the problem was she's like, well, let's find a property down in this area. This is what fits my market, and she wanted me to find MLS properties. I'm like, well, they said, yeah, just get an agent, and they'll show you around to different properties. I'm like, well, I could show you their property, but if you buy a property for $100,000 and then you go around the next day, and if you buy this on the MLS, there's a record of that purchase. So any other agent can track that purchase, and you don't do anything except for maybe clean everything out. If you go to sell it the next day for $140,000, they're gonna be like, "What the hell?"
Yeah.
I don't know if they should swear.
It's fine.
My apologies, but yeah, they're not gonna like it. So the fact is that it's just like no one's gonna just go in there and pay. They're like, well, they're only. So she went to this entire program. She paid $20,000. She spent all of her money on the program, and the program basically said, well, we'll give you an access to our $600,000 line of credit, but with this line of credit, you can only do flips. I'm like, but that's crazy because if you kept the $20,000, you would have had the ability to just put a down payment on a property, turn it into a rental, maybe even able to get a hard money loan, and then rehab that property. Got some money out of that rehab because this is 2020, 2021, and then you could flip that into your next deal, and you could still you'll maybe have $50,000 or $60,000 for your next deal, and you'll be able to build up more. And they're telling you, no, you put your money into our program, now you only get a line of credit, and we're going to restrict how you actually use this money.
Right.
Like, well, that's crazy to me.
Why wouldn't you just do it on your own and then have the freedom to do whatever you want?
Exactly.
Right. So it's almost like, paying extra money for taxes or whatever. Like, why would you give your money to the government to use for whatever they want instead of you having it if you needed to? But if you don't have the discipline to put it to the side, so when the tax bill's due and you could write a check for $15,000, then maybe you should give it to them in advance, right? So it's really all about how our own personal financial disciplines are. And with those investments, that's the same kind of thing. It kind of triggered into, like, there was another company, for instance, that was it was a book thing, right? So it was like 3 books a month you'd get, and I was really interested in trying to read more. So I was like, you know what? I think this would be cool. Then you could do like an online book club, or you could do different things on book reviews and all this kind of stuff. And it was the same thing so it was a place where, like you were saying, I personally had some experience in the industry. I understood compensation plans very thoroughly, and I understood a lot when it came to disclosures and being able to market online, whether they liked it or not, or whether that was available or not. So he was definitely sold into the idea, just follow the plan, just follow the plan, just follow the plan. And I'm like, listen, man, I get it. That's for people that know nothing. And I don't know nothing. I've done this a few times.
Yeah.
And so then we ended up like, you know, the Empower thing was funny because I went to a few of their conferences, one in Miami, one in, and there was, you know, thousands and thousands of people. They had 15, 20, 30 speakers that were all being successful, you know, so you're hearing all these stories.
Rah-rah.
It was amazing in a sense and very motivational, a lot of motivational speaking, a lot of great stories. And like you said, sometimes the stories get old. I want the meat and potato. I want the secret handshake. Let's just get rolling. And so it was funny. I went to this event with this book one in Milwaukee, or maybe it was Madison, but either way, there was one couple for 4 hours. They only had one couple that was telling their success story. There was a husband-wife couple.
For 4 hours?
For 4 hours. Like, it was her for an hour and a half, then there was a lunch break, then they came back, then it was him for an hour and a half, then there was a small break, and then it was both of them together for... And I was like, okay, well, how much... You're looking around at 400 people in the audience. Yeah. Like, how many successful people are in this room? Yeah. That they only have one couple on stage. This is crazy. And then it was like, the funniest part was I did look at
Were they the founders?
No.
Because that's the only reason I asked. It's like, it's like, you know, like, hey, the success story, but then it's the founders.
Right.
And then you're like, oh, you know you have problems with that.
Yeah, that's definitely a red flag, folks, if it's only the people running the company are the ones making money. But... So it was just the funniest part of it was like I did my research. I looked at the compensation plan. I looked at the plan. Yeah. And then I'm listening to their story after this guy that brought me in is telling me follow the plan, follow the plan. And then I'm hearing their story. I'm like, is that the plan? Because the only people successful that are on stage right now are not following the plan. They're doing something different, and that's what's making them break free from everybody else. Yeah. So maybe sometimes it's something that could be done.
There was, this goes back. My first job out of college was a 100% commission sales job. I knew nothing about nothing. Like, I mean, I didn't. I would go into it was literally going into small businesses, and I was selling like AT&T services, like phone services, for small businesses, seeing if they wanted to change. The entire idea was, let's go out and go talk to people. And they had 1 week of training for us, and they took us out one day, and they walked us around, and I don't even think the sales guy made a sale when we were out, because we only went out for like an hour or two around our neighborhood. And I'm just like, okay, great, this is not helpful. I did it for like 2-3 months. But, you know, like the classic example of a salesperson where you just get frustrated and you get angry, but their basic model was, okay, great. So here's what you do. If all you do is sell these phone services and you do like 7 lines a day, which it was like $15 a line, at the end of 1 year you'll have like $90,000 in salary, which to me at the age of 23, 22, I don't remember, something like that, I'm like, that's a lot of money.
Heck yeah.
Like, this is great. So I started going out there. I did everything else. I think I hit 7 lines one time because I sold, and every time, by the way, my wife and I drive by this place because the restaurant is now closed, and they have a for sale sign out. So when I go up to my grandmother who's 96, it's right around her area, and I drive by there, and I always tell my wife, that's where I sold my 7 lines.
Nice.
Because it's just like, the place is closed. And she said, I know. Every time we drive by this, you have to make a comment. I said, yes. But it's like, but the thing was, it's just like their entire model was go walk door to door until you do that. But like, you know, you go walk door to door to businesses and you run out of places to go. And it's just like the idea here is that you could just keep walking around to places. It was just not working. And I almost did another job at the same time, like that. I think like it was a few months after that, where they were selling website services. And they were like, well, you have to sell 3 websites a day. And this is when websites were very new. So they were going around to businesses and trying to sell services. And it made sense because I know small businesses needed websites even then. But they wouldn't go through, and the guy actually did sell one website while I was out there with him, so I actually will say it was interesting. But they wanted me to start the next day, and I'm like, well, I'm gonna go up to Madison because I was just graduated from college. I said I had to go see some friends, and I had to pick up some stuff for my dorm or whatever, or the apartment I was living in. so I could move out. I could start on Monday. They said that doesn't work. You either have to start tomorrow or we're not going to work with you. I'm like,
fear of loss kind of crap. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, have a good day. It was just like, if that's your type of attitude, I can only imagine how horrible you're going to be to work with. But I remember all those different type of sales models where they're just like, yeah, you go out there every day and you get this done and this is how many you have to get. And it's like, those are, they're right. You do have to hit a certain number of goals, and there is a lot of activity to do for sales. And even now, like, even while we were talking, by the way, I have a daily reminder, make 10 calls. Because I have to, if I don't make at least 10 calls every day, like doing follow-up with people, and I don't do it on the weekend as much just because I have family time.
Yeah.
But during the week, I have to religiously hit at least 10 people. It doesn't matter if I'm driving around. I'm calling people, and I'm making sure that I reach out to 10 people, because I need to be able to follow up with leads, follow up with what's going on with prospects and clients.
And then having a good CRM or something that really can keep detailed instructions, because my brain is not set for sales. Like, there's different people that are better at remembering names, remembering families, remembering your kids' names. Yeah. That works, man, of course, yeah. Right? And if some of them are kind of cheating with a CRM that are keeping notes and documenting phone calls and tracking how long you're on the phone and and trying to at least be able to have some form of analysis of your production, that's a good thing. And then, leaders are readers. Multi-billions of dollars spent on psychology of sales and all these other things. And that's one of the things that the higher level courses in certain things like Empower and different things would get into 100%. With neurological linguistic programming and embedded commands and all this kind of stuff. And it's fascinating when you get into it. And the funny thing is like the greatest salesman in the world, right? The Bible for sales back in the day. But now, obviously, most people, it's very difficult to make money selling cars because the price points are so tight and there's not a lot of leeway. You'd almost have to kind of be into the used market in order to have a little more flexibility on making a $500 commission on a car. You're selling a $70,000 car and you get $100 on it. It's like the crazy, right?
Well, and even even was in the mortgage industry. Like, I was a mortgage broker before the crash. Even a lot of the car guys got out then, and I could tell you, half of our team at one point was car guys, former car guys, because they knew how to sell. They had a decent network because of the fact they had gone with the cars, and they would go out there and do that.
They got a list. They got client lists, so you could reach out. They knew
what they were doing, and it was insane. So I agree with you, and I'm with you on that. Like, I don't remember everything. I take copious notes when I'm on HubSpot whenever I can, and that's the one thing. Like, if I'm in the car, that like I'll have to then do voice to talk, because I will not the moment I leave that car, I will forget every single thing that happened, and if I don't do anything, nothing's gonna happen at that point, because it has to be taken right then, right there. It's my superpower, and it's also my weakness, because it's like I'm with you. It's like I will leave something, and then I'll 100% forget about it, and it's great because it's like I'm not burdened by it. But at the same point, I need to call somebody in 3 weeks, and I need to do that, and I put it in my phone on HubSpot and do that. And actually, one of the things that we're working on for our contractor business is that we probably need to get into the team aspect now, because we're starting to have some issues, because we have I'm doing some follow up, and then one of the other guys is doing follow up. And we need to make sure we're coordinating on that. And
not double calling somebody. It looks unprofessional, like you don't know what's going on or whatever. Yeah. And that's wild stuff. And, and then there's obviously, that's where the technology comes in that's magical. Like when Dragon first came out, that was like the first script to talk to text. And it wasn't perfect. You could train it, and you could say comma, and you could do different things when you really learned how to use it well. But
Dragon, it was frustrating.
Because then you're 3 hours editing, on 7,000 words that you just spoke or whatever. And so the idea is simple, that if you can compress time and be more efficient, like if you have a 40-minute commute to work every day, and there's this book you always wanted to write. I mean, the reality is you can just jot down an outline and do one chapter a day talking to your phone on the way to work.
100%.
And so you really could be working a full-time job and cranking out, 3 books, 4 books a year, easy.
And what I would say is also, if you're looking to crank out a book, and truthfully, selling books online is going to be hard today because it's just
there's a lot.
There's a lot. There's a lot of competition. I wrote my first book in 2000. Well, I think we published it in 2008, 2009. So, and I did a few more after that, as you know. Sorry, I get all choked up over this. But like one of the first books I wrote, like it was one of the first ebooks I wrote, because I wrote a lot of books that were like physical books, and I wrote some ebooks. And one of the first books I wrote was there's something called Amazon MTurk, and I don't know if you've ever used it. Mm-hmm. It's basically like little micro tasks. So one of the things that was great was I went on Fiverr, and I said I'm gonna write. When I started writing content, I went on Fiverr to actually write content for other people because I wanted to micro test if I could actually write content for other people. And somebody hired me to do some articles. I wrote 3 articles for him. Then because I put my name on there, so he reached out to me on Facebook and said, "Hey, look, let's do this off of Fiverr, which you're not supposed to do, but like truthfully, if someone kicks me off of Fiverr, that I don't really care because I made $12. It's not like it's a big deal." So he said, "I'll pay you $250 to write, divided by 5, so 25 articles." So I said, "Great, let's do that." Or yeah, did I do the math right? Something. 40 articles, 50 articles, something like that. It was insane. So, but I went on Amazon MTurk, and I basically would write one version of the article, and I said, "Here's what I want you to do. It was like all keyword based articles, and back then you could do different versions of different keywords, and you could write them as different articles.
Yeah.
So I would have that. I would pay like $1 or like 50 cents. And this is like the budget for the entire project. And I would have 5 to 10 people write 1 paragraph each for each of these different things. And some of the people would just come back with like 6 pages, and I'm like, "No, you just copied that off of Google, and I'm not paying you." And you could actually say no. But like, people would write the entire article for me.
Yeah.
And then I could go and I could twist it around and repurpose it and something like that. And this is 2010, 2011, and you were able to do that. I wouldn't do that now. But it was crazy because you could still have that capability of doing it. But it took time.
Right.
It was a pain in the butt. And I would never do that. I would never do an article again for $5. But I wanted to learn the process. And by actually breaking down an article into individual paragraphs, I was able to study what to do for each article. And it was crazy because, I could see how everything works. So, when ChatGPT organizes stuff, I understand how they organize it because I had to learn how to organize an article so it would work for people to read. So it would work for Google. So it would work when people are reading the article. Do you get to the first paragraph, then go to the second paragraph? What sells them on each one, and where do they drop off? So I learned a lot from that, but at the same point, it was so time-consuming. Same thing with Dragon, like you were saying.
Yeah.
It just, there was no way. That's the thing. If I was a copywriter now, I could write things I could do it really quick because you could do it through ChatGPT and then edit it. But at the same point, what's the point of having me if I could just do it through ChatGPT?
Right. Yeah. And my typing skills aren't off the charts. I have a friend that was on the forums back in the day, and I was into the saltwater aquarium hobby, and this was the most Reef Central was the most popular saltwater aquarium forum out there. Okay. And it's kind of funny because then everybody thinks that they're making all this money, so everybody wants to do their own thing, and then they go start something, and then they run out of business because that was a funny because censorship was always kind of a thing, and shilling and advertising, and but the reality was it was the beginning of the social media buzz of all these online experts.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing is that, if people have negative attitudes, you think everybody out there is trying to destroy the world, and it's really not the case, right? So most people are trying to help others, and they don't even realize they're not really helping by just regurgitating something that they read somewhere when they can't even cite the resource. It's like, in an experience like with threads, with forums like that, the only thing I'm interested is your personal experience. I don't want to hear about what you heard about. If you're a successful reefer that has this beautiful tank, and I could come to your house and see a jamming system that's unbelievable, and it stays like that for a year or 2 or 3, and I don't hear about you posting my tank crashed, or whatever, well, then obviously I'm not going to trust your information as much as somebody that's been in the hobby for 20 years and I never heard him posting about a tank crash, right? So it was kind of funny, and so it's like, I just want to hear your personal experience, and it was funny that the people that really knew might not have been sharing the same information as what some of the books might say. And then the industry was a little strange, because then you have your 5 key authors, and then these authors in the industry are citing each other as resources, and it's kind of like this thing where it's just like they lose the touch because they get so busy with circuit speaking and writing books and all this stuff. It's like, do you even have a tank at home anymore? So it's like, the people that would like give their information of their experience, then they start getting shredded. People start criticizing them, like, oh, you can't do that. It's like, well, this is what I've done for 20 years. So, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I don't know exactly.
Like bigger pockets sometimes for real estate investors, you get that all the time. Like, people will just give out advice because they heard it at a conference or something like that.
Yeah.
And then you'll have an experienced investor come in, like, so people are like, what do I do with this tenant with this? And and then someone will say, kick him out. It's like, well, that's a stupid comment.
Yeah.
Because clearly you've never dealt with an eviction.
Right.
It's like saying, or people say cash for keys, which is, if you've ever done an eviction, is not a bad thing, especially in Chicago, where it's a horrendous eviction schedule.
And $2,500 is a lot of money for somebody that's struggling or something like that, and it's nothing compared to what it's going to cost you to.
It's going to be $5 to $10 grand to evict somebody in about a year. Like my business partner, we've been fortunate. I think we had to do cash for keys on somebody, but we haven't had to do a full eviction. My partner had to do a full eviction a lot. He had one. He did cash for keys like a month before COVID started, which was the greatest stroke of luck, because if
that would have been 4 years.
It been a year or two. It's just like it delayed everything. But he had another one that was a CHA one, and this was a tenant who was a hoarder, and he had an evictor, and it took a year. I mean, and he had to get a CHA involved. The CHA had to remove her from the program because it was so bad.
And then the property cleanup and everything that goes along with it.
Because it's just...
For any of you guys, any local to Chicago area that's listening and interested in property investment and all that sort of stuff. So that's what Andy's main focus is right now. But a great tip that most people don't realize, because I have two rentals. I'm not a huge landlord, but and that's the interesting thing, that a lot of these background check companies and all these different resources, they want you doing 200 hits a month or something for some subscription, and it's just like, for a small investor that's only like doing background checks twice every 3 years, for 5 applicants or something, there's resources out there to help them, and one of the things,
we're pushing away from Buildium, I think. We'll see. We're not sure yet, but we found something that's a free service that we just have to pay for, like, transaction fees, or the client possibly pays for transaction fees, or the tenant pays, and then they'll pay for the reports and stuff like that.
That's cool. And then a lot of real estate brokers, they have, through their brokerage company, might have access to some of those services as well that are paid for by the corporation or whatever. But if you're a small guy out there trying to start off, that's difficult. So what my story is, I had a house in Elgin that I bought, and I lived there. Then I got a roommate to help with paying the mortgage. And then I got married, moved to Chicago with my wife, and then he got a friend to move in. Mm-hmm. So now I have my friend and his friend, and then eventually, maybe 6 months or a year later, my friend moves out, and this guy gets somebody else. Now I got 2 strangers living there. It's all kind of a cash deal on the side. There's no lease, nothing's on paper. I'm like, this is not good, right? This is not a friendly handshake anymore. I got to get legit. Right. So I start jumping through the hoops to figure out what I got to do to get legit. And in Elgin, there's actually a landlord. There's a landlord license you have to get in order to be a landlord. It doesn't matter if you have 1 property or 7,000 properties. It's the same, almost the same process. And it's like $50 for the license, which no big deal, right? And then you had to go to this 8-hour class on a Saturday. And I was like, man, I'm trying to do the right thing here, and they're going to send me to detention for 8 hours on a Saturday? This is ridiculous.
And I'm sure they were very popular on a Saturday with a bunch of landlords.
Well, there was 40 people there.
I'm sure they weren't there by choice. And
well, you would think, right? Yeah. Until you show up. And I had a legal pad and a pen, and my pen did not stop moving for that full 8 hours. It was ridiculous how informative and how wonderful this was. Yeah. So Elgin's strategy was basically this. If we teach our landlords how to background check and how to screen their tenants legally without getting into trouble for discrimination and all these other things, we're going to teach them the rules, because most of the time, unfortunately, the tenants know the rules more than the landlord, because the landlord's busy and they game the system. So if we can teach the landlords the game, then they can screen people, and then that brings better clients into our neighborhoods.
Yeah.
So then then the word gets out, and if all the landlords are doing background checks for evictions and these different things, then those scammers can't game the system in Elgin. Yeah. Now they can hear that, Carpenterville don't check. So they'll go in Carpenterville, but then you're also getting a lot of the crime, you're cleaning up some of these apartment complexes, and it really was a pretty good way to clean up a lot of Elgin.
I'm not, and you know what, as a realtor, I will say, look, we're licensed, I'm licensed now as a licensed realtor, we're a licensed contractor, and by the way, I've learned more about how to be a better investor and better landlord from being a contractor than I think I ever learned.
Of course.
From any course on real estate investing. And same thing with being a realtor. I mean, there's a lot of stuff there that I will constantly be telling people about, and they're like, oh, really? I'm like, yeah, you can't do that. It's because, I mean, any realtor, anyone serious about being an investor, at some point you'll probably get a license. I know some people will resist because I don't want to be licensed, I don't want to do this, and I don't really need it. But at the same point, there's so many things that you learn from that, and there's so many other things you could do with that just it doesn't make sense why you wouldn't.
And what's the process for those that don't know on getting a real estate license? Now, hopefully, there's real estate brokers out there going to be like, you can't tell them it's that easy. You're going to flood the market.
It's not easy.
Okay.
First of all, I'm not telling you it's easy. I'm telling you you should. Look, even if you don't get licensed, you take the class, and I mean, the class is basically what they do is. Illinois changed this a few years ago. So it used to be you would take one class, then you would do the test and you get licensed. Now you take a 75-hour class, you get licensed, then you find a brokerage, and then because you used to be able to become your own managing broker by yourself, but now you have to have 2 years experience, which makes sense. You don't really want I actually have a managing broker's license. I got it because I was debating if I wanted to ever set up my own. I haven't done it because it doesn't make sense financially, but if I wanted to, I could. Plus, I got to learn extra things. But the other thing is that you take the 75 hours. Going back to this, sorry, I got a little bit off track. You take the test, which is not easy, by the way. I don't I still to this day wonder how I passed both of them. And then afterwards, you find a broker that'll work with you and be your sponsoring broker. Once you do that, you then have I want to say 6 months or something like that to then take another 40-hour class that you have to take afterwards. Now, after that, you then have to be licensed. You have to take 12 hours of licensing every 2 years. Or something
so what kind of stuff is on the test? Like I would imagine there's some contract law, some interpretation stuff. So it could almost be like the bar. Yeah. In a sense that's what lawyers are looking at when they're looking at contracts and precedences and legal, rules and
100%. There's a lot of legal stuff. And by the way, one of the things they actually talk about is how agents cannot just write in stuff on a purchase contract. It's actually there was 1968. There was one of the one of the RESPA laws that they basically said, agents don't have the right because they're not lawyers to fill in information and write their own contract. You could do as an investor, by the way, it's kind of interesting. I could write a contract for myself to buy a property, but if I go represent you to buy a property, I have to follow I should probably use the same form anyways, but I have to use the MLS. Well, now it's 8.0, and the idea behind that is all I do is I fill out and I check whatever needs to be checked. because I am not licensed as an attorney. If I was licensed as an attorney, I could do that. So they do have a lot of stuff in there, but they have a lot of how to market yourself, like all the different rules on that. There's a huge amount of stuff on there. They talk about title, like you talk about the different types of title you own. Like, so for example, like you own your this property with your wife. I know that's not joint tenancy in the entirety. I think it is something. Sorry, I should probably know all the different. There's a lot of different title variations on how you own a property. There's also different ways that you can own the property, like if you own it through an LLC, if you own it through yourself individually.
Or trust or whatever.
Yeah, a trust. So they talk about a lot of the different types of ownership. They also go through like how property taxes work, which by the way, it's confusing as all can be, because like that formula is insane, and I still don't always get it right, because it's just like the way that they have it set up is just confusing. But like you have to look at how they set everything up, and then there's a lot of math in there, and just going through how the mortgage is and
percent of value, and even just doing property tax appeals is complicated for a lot of people. Don't understand, because you're doing the board of review, and then you're also doing the county assessors, so it's complicated. And just so everybody knows out there, this is the state of Illinois, and so it's...
And the state of Illinois makes it confusing, sorry.
Yeah, probably purposely in a lot of ways, but either way, these rules are different from state to state. There's all these different things. So like a funny story is, I bought a property in Colorado, and then when I was injured, it was a vacant property. Yep. But I put 20% down because it was a commercial property. Now, the house I bought in 2008 was a veteran first-time buyers program for a veteran benefit, so I put $0 down and did an 80-20 loan.
Yeah.
So I had $0 invested in this property that was $150,000 upside down. So if you wanted to turn the keys over to anything, here you go. Yeah. I have not. I put $10,000 in remodel in the basement. That's but the other property I put $20,000 down on. So if I lost that,
it's a bigger deal.
It was a huge deal, right? When I was work injured, and then I lost income, and then I was working deals with everybody, and we could talk about bankruptcy laws and different things too. Because I had a spiritual advisor early on when I really straightened out my life, and some people know that story. We could get into that a little bit. It doesn't matter, but. And then I was like, what's the financial plan to get yourself out of debt? I'm like, well, I got to file bankruptcy. And he's like, the hell you do? You call and you work out the best deal you can, and you pay your debt.
Yeah.
Okay. So then when I got hurt, and then I was off, I didn't get paid for 10 months. All my properties are in foreclosure. There's nothing I can do about it. And then there was a judgment that was put out against me on the 80-20 loan, because the 20% loan, I said, listen, if you lower my interest rate,
cover the second one in the.
I'm like, if I file bankruptcy, and I think I knew that you can't like threaten bankruptcy, with creditors or whatever. But I said, if I was to file bankruptcy, you're not going to get a penny, because it's $150,000 upside down, and your $60,000 is gone.
Yeah.
And so why wouldn't you work a better deal out with me? And I guarantee you get all your money. Just lower my interest rate by 2 points, and I promise you'll get all your money. And he's like, well, I should actually increase the interest rate because this is a higher risk loan now. And I was like, well, if that's what you want to do, go ahead and do that, right? So he ends up filing a $60,000 judgment against me because he knew, for a breach of contract, because he knew he wasn't going to get a penny out of bankruptcy. And so then I was forced into having to file bankruptcy to clear that judgment. And I thought I was screwed. And then I'm like stressed out and all this other stuff. And I'm talking to the same spiritual advisor that told me that I can't file bankruptcy. And he's like, no, file bankruptcy. And I was like, you said I can't file bankruptcy. He's like, no, listen, you had a work injury. You have a loss of income for 10 months. You were in dire straits. This is the reason that program exists. You're not gaming the system in this specific instance. This is why that program exists. So it was okay.
Need to figure out what your options. Like the problem is people get into those scenarios, and a lot of times they're just like, they're so frustrated, and they're so. And you and I have both been there at that point where you're dealing with something. It's overwhelming. Like first of all, you can't even associate it with it being your problem at some point. There was definitely a point where, like, when I was losing that property in Florida I was telling you about, that it was just hard to associate, like, hey, I'm actually losing a property. And I had some properties in Indiana as well that I lost. It's a whole different story. I'm not going to go into that. But, like, that's the thing. Like, you need somebody to help you out. I had a coach, rest in peace, his name was James Budd. he was an amazing person, and he was the one who actually mentioned to me. He said, "Well, do some more research on what you could do, because like the CPA said, I don't know what you could do." And so I went out there and I took a look, and I found that you could declare insolvency. It was the last year doing it, and the CPA took a look and he said, "Oh yeah, you're right," and I did it. And I know it worked because this was more than 7 years ago, so I'm all clear for the IRS.
Yeah.
So whatever I did was 100% legal, because they never came back and they never said anything. But I wiped out $150,000 in debt, which was scary as can be. And I didn't have to. And like I said, I think I maybe paid a few $1,000s, and I did that. And there were also times, like even on a small level, like I learned from that. Like I had a ComEd bill or a Comcast bill where they didn't give me service for the last month, and they charged me for it. And I said, "I'm not paying you." 5 years later, we're going to get a hard money loan.
Yeah.
And the hard money
There's
loan
a judgment.
That you have a judgment or collection. I think it was a collection.
$47.
Yeah, it was $250. And I'm just like, I said, yeah, I refuse to pay. Like, I even bought my house with that collection on there. They didn't say anything.
Yeah.
And then we go to do a hard money loan, and they said, we can't do it because of that one collection.
Nice.
They said, you have to get it cleared from your record. And this is 5 years in, so in another 2 years it would clear. And I'm just like, I don't want to pay them a cent. They don't deserve it.
Right.
And so I called up keep saying ComEd, I mean Comcast. I called up Comcast and I said, look, you didn't give me service. They said, well, we did, blah, blah, blah. It's back and forth. So I said, they said, look, I'm not going to pay the full amount. I said, what's the minimum amount that you need? I think they said they wanted half. I said, fine. I paid them $125. I said, I want a letter from you saying the moment I pay this, I can remove this from my credit and you won't do anything about it. I know there's a word for what you call it, but
that's a good tip for anybody trying to clean up their credit. If you request in writing that paid letter gets sent to you, then it immediately comes off the credit report.
Yes.
If you don't ask that, a lot of times they just forget about it.
Yeah. So I specifically requested, I said, look, as long as you get it, as long as I have something in writing saying that once I pay this, it's done. So I think I got something like an email from them ahead of time just outlining everything. I paid the collection, and within a month, I think my score was around the 680 mark, 690. I think it jumped to like 740, 750 in a month.
Yeah.
I mean, it was insane. I mean, it's just...
I've had some large swings on credit scores and stuff because, those hits are weird. Like, they don't want more than 2 per, blah, 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 or whatever. And it's like a year, you get 3, and now all of a sudden your score drops 100 points. It's like crazy. But, Lord willing, we could, not have to use credit and, and be a little more, save money, have money to put down. Because obviously you put 20% down on most loans, you're a little bit of credit issues is not going to be a problem. But it's funny, just to close the loop on the Colorado story. What happened was, so that was in foreclosure. It was going to auction, right? And then there was this whole deal where I thought that the second mortgage company guy might have really been trying to target me because he's like, this guy's got 2 rental properties, an investment property in Colorado, and he's not going to pay me kind of thing. Yeah. Like, I think this guy's trying to buy my property from underneath me just for spite. And now I'm like, am I paranoid? What's going on? It's like, because there was some weird things that were going on. And so I end up calling up the realtor in Colorado. And I was like, look, man, there's this thing with the deed. And I'm just like, I'm not really sure exactly what's what in this thing. Is there a real estate attorney that you can refer me to in the state of Colorado that I can ask some questions about the way that this process is working? And the broker out there is like, well, we don't really do that.
You don't have
and I was like, you don't do what? She's like, yeah, we don't use attorneys. We just write the contract ourselves and shake hands. And I was like, wow. So, it kind of goes into the whole government regulation world where, okay, so we have far much more regulation in Illinois, which initially was designed to protect the consumer. But at the end of the day,
the law that I'm talking about originated in Chicago. I remember reading that because I thought that's the funniest thing ever. Of course, Chicago would ruin it for everyone else,
right? Or try.
I know that they don't ruin everything, but they do ruin a lot. I mean, look, Chicago is great, and there's a lot of great things about being in Chicago. I know people will, if you're not from Chicago, they knock it all the time. And I'm not saying there's not bad things, but there's a lot of amazing things about this city. the bad thing is that the government is slow, doesn't work right, and current leadership is.
Yeah, there's regulation that's initially designed to try to protect people that gets manipulated into an advantage for some over others, and then it gets into corruption and all these other kind of things. But I mean, just to talk Chicago a little bit, because like you said, it's a great city and it's amazing what's happening, and we'll see what happens in the next couple of months. There's some rumors about some ICE agents and some sanctuary city fights with the new administration coming in with illegal, criminals, immigrants, not just illegal by crossing illegally, but also illegal and criminal by having had committed many crimes. There was just an article about like a 68 or 70-year-old woman that got stomped in the head by somebody that was an 8-time felon that's running around the streets. So crime is an issue, regardless of what people in the media want to say. The numbers are manipulated unquestionably, because if you're releasing people and not convicting them, then it doesn't count as a crime, right? So I guess that crime never happened if they never got convicted.
I will say, just before I'm sorry.
Go ahead. No, it's cool.
Like, one of the things that just, you go to a Walgreens, you go everywhere, and it kind of just breaks your heart watching, because they, what was it, DeSantis and who's the governor in Texas?
Abbott.
They basically said, hey, we're going to ship everyone up to Chicago, New York, and Boston, and see how they like it. And they said,
Martha's Vineyard first, which was even funnier.
Yeah, which and the funny thing was that a lot of times they've tried to help them, but it was an overwhelming amount that they sent. They sent busloads and busloads and busloads, and they did it deliberately to make it overwhelming. Look, and I know they've helped some people with everything, and it's not as bad, because there were definitely some tent cities that were popping up, and I'm even I just drove by Irving Park today on the highway on Kedzie Kennedy, and that was a huge tent city for years, and I didn't see anyone underneath there, which I was shocked, because for years you couldn't even walk through there, because it was tent after tent.
Yeah.
And I know they're trying to clean that up, but it breaks my heart, because of the fact you have all these people that are trying to make a better life for the family, because they're not illegal people, they're human beings like everyone else, and look, if I could hire them, I would, because I'm a contractor, but they're not licensed. If we could have them do some basic work, that's fine. But the problem is that then we have to do a 1099 with them. Then you can't pay them.
Right.
Then we're liable for that. And it's the problem is that you can't have you need to have a way of helping them out. And people say, well, they're taking our jobs. Whose jobs? When we offer this job to somebody else, they won't take it.
Well, anybody will do any. So Flipside Frolic is kind of funny. So if we do come across an area where we disagree, the game plan and the mission of the podcast is that we talk about it. I'm not here to convince anybody or change anybody's mind. I just want to understand your positions better. And so if we explain our positions for a little bit, the fun thing is that at some point maybe we'll flip. Yeah. And then we have to debate the other person's position.
I think we're a little bit off on this.
Not quite. And most of the time, I think that most people are 95% in the middle on most of these issues. Yeah. So yes, if you're a small business owner and you would like to help people, there's an element of bad people out there too that are looking to game the system or scam the system. So now you try to help somebody out, and next thing you know, 3 days in, now he's got a back injury. And now your workman's comp insurance doubles. And so you have a liability and you have risk by doing these so-called nice things.
Yes.
And that has to be taken into consideration with people. So with Chicago particularly, it's interesting because, and you could look at LA right now. You could look at the money that they spent in the homeless problem. So they spent whatever the number was, more than, I think, $3 billion on curing the homeless issue, and it went up 40%. So it seems the more they spend, the more they create homelessness. And that doesn't necessarily mean it's due to blatant incompetence. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's people scamming the system.
There were probably also more people who came into LA because they heard they were helping.
Yes, there's no question that you're creating an incentive to go there if you have all these benefits, but also that if you're creating a market for money to be made helping homeless people, then you're creating nonprofits, organizations, all these different things that are out there to supposedly help people. And unfortunately, some of the work that I do with veterans, and I do work with recovering alcoholics and drug addicts, I do a lot of different things. And creating a market for that is a dangerous place, because altruistic service and the idea of helping somebody and not wanting anything in return is kind of rare. And of course, people have to live, people have to eat, but when your sole focus of a veteran organization whose core mission statement is to end veteran homelessness in Illinois, and you have a salary, your main focus as a board member is the preservation of the organization. Yeah. When the reality is you should be trying to work yourself out of a job. If you solve that problem as the CEO of this nonprofit organization to cure veteran homelessness, you would think you'd be marketable after you finish and say, I solved that problem, now I'll solve your problem too. But that's really not how it seems to work. But if you're making some of these salaries that I've heard to help people,
it's
dangerous.
Funny. I told you I worked for a nonprofit for a little while in one of those jobs, and you know, one of the problems I had with that job was, first of all, it was a dream job in some ways, and then I had 3 different managers in 1 year that went from telling me exactly what I was going to be doing, which is exactly what I wanted to do, to the third manager saying, no, you should do something 100% different, which I have no skills for, and then didn't understand why I didn't have the ability to do it. But, you know, one of the things that was kind of interesting was that the founder who created this nonprofit, I don't want to give names, but they started with the idea to eliminate a specific illness. And I'm not, if I go into the illness, I'll sort of
rot them out, sure.
Of course, it's never mind. The thing was that she was frustrated, I think, at a certain level that it had been 20 years since the nonprofit had started and they hadn't solved the illness. It's like, she had a daughter who suffered from it, and this is a very well-to-do family who's very successful, and, you know, like, it's frustrating because, you know, you're right, like, a nonprofit, it works to help solve a problem, but at the same point, like, you know, the people who are there, you're getting paid a salary. Like, I got paid a nice salary to be there. Right. And I'm not saying, like, I'll be honest, it was very inspiring to be able to be there, to do something to help with that, and there were some moments in there that I will never forget. I had some life-altering moments there. Like, I was able to do interviews with people. I was helping do the production for interviews with one of the people who was suffering from it, and one of the women who was hosting it, she eventually, after I left, she lost her daughter, and, like, I can't even imagine, being a father now, what she went through, like, but you know, like, one of the things is that, you know, we had the opportunity to go into their house one day and see what a day in their life was, and we actually recorded the daughter and got to interview her and do things, and just, I think, like, that was probably the single best day I ever had working for somebody else, because I had the opportunity to do something. But at the same point, to what you're saying, I don't think the goal of the organization was to solve the illness, and I don't think we made that much progress in a year, if any progress was made at all in 20 years. I mean, there were some new medicines that came online, but it wasn't like they had gone in and had, like, revolutionary change. I mean, I know that they had made change, and they've definitely made change. They've probably made changes since I left. I can't tell you that or not, but it still exists as a problem.
Yeah, that's that fine line between, you know, if we could accept the fact that we're responsible for the effort, not the results, you know, and we our job is to try, and we leave the outcome to whatever magical powers out there that some might call God or whatever. But
by the way, one more thought on that.
Yeah.
I was listening to the first episode you had, and the person who was there who had cancer, and he made a comment about how, like, look, he had prostate cancer, I think it was. He said, look, I won't die from that anymore, but I need to help protect the next generation. I think that's the problem. Nonprofits don't get into that idea sometimes. I think they get too much into your salary.
And then, but just to raise awareness is something also. So that's Bill Moore was the first guest, and that's part of why I have the beard, in a sense that he always did Movember every year. So we would always grow the mustache out for that. And then COVID happened. So then the next year, I was like, do I have to shave on October 31st, or can I just keep going because I didn't shave the whole year? So I call it my COVID beard, just because That's how I just didn't stop yet, just because I really thought I thought being in a possible a shop working on equipment in 100 degrees, like, this thing is going to get annoying, and the reality is after the itchiness passes and you put some product and you got some tips and watch some YouTube videos and on proper care, it's actually, I feel cooler in the summer, because it's almost like maybe some sweats in there, and it might almost act like a swamp cooler or something. But yeah. So as far as altruistic service,
more of a beard than I do. I mean, I know the side is it takes me forever to grow the side. The mustache just grows in like that.
Yeah. A lot of people, have it differently, and it doesn't make us, it's not there's not anything to read too much deeper into that, but the altruistic service, though, like you said, for a nonprofit like Movember or something, that's really just about raising awareness. And then so that gets into lobbying and trying to get things passed, and there's obviously resistance if there's companies making money on medication, and
That's a whole different story when we get into pharmaceutical companies and everything else, because like what is it, like we don't have real food in this country, and it's like you have like everything that you have is like, it's so
genetically modified.
Which, by the way, some GMOs is okay. Like there's the original GMOs were made to prevent pesticides from getting into crops naturally without having to get pesticides. So there are realistic use cases for GMOs, and they didn't harm the nutrient value of the crops. But the way we use it now to help modify things, because it just makes it cheaper, but it doesn't help the nutrition value, and sometimes you just strip the nutrition value out of it altogether, and we don't have real food and everything like that. Then you combine that with the fact that then after we have a problem, we have to go to the doctor. Now, I can tell you personally that I've had great experiences with doctors, but I've also had bad experiences, and like everything else, there's bad to both, but we just have to fix some of that stuff. It's just annoying. It's frustrating.
Well, just like, you can have a bad mechanic that can't fix your car.
Yes.
It doesn't mean that everybody that has a medical degree is a genius by any means. And it is a free market. And so, for the most part, if you might be limited based on your insurance or PPO, HMO, whatever, go to certain doctors or whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
But if something don't feel right, just leave and go get another doctor. It's not that difficult.
Yeah.
And I just recently did that because there was a scenario with, it's interesting. There was just a study like 6 days ago that was talking about the bad cholesterol and how having some additional cholesterol in your body might actually help prevent Alzheimer, because it prevents, there's cholesterol in your brain, and it helps prevent the plaque buildup and whatever the case may be. So, and then there was a lot of talk about good cholesterol, bad cholesterol. Is it really bad? Is it really good? Is it some other genetic thing that some people are more susceptible to clogging than other people? And so it may or may not even have to do with cholesterol in some ways. But either way, it was like my personal story was the bad number was at the bottom of high. So it wasn't high yet, but it was at the peak of almost trouble, something to think about.
Yeah.
And I specifically was like, look, I've done fitness routines in the past. I've had 40-pound transformations in 16 weeks in the past. I know nutrition. I know exercise. And I'm not in the best place right now. And my diet is horrible right now. And I'm planning on fixing that. Now, a lot of people, I can understand that a doctor is going to hear that from most of his patients, even if his main diagnosis was, or his main prescription was eat right and exercise, which we should all do, walk a little more, these sorts of things, and most of us don't. All right, so if they're not going to do that, then maybe the only answer is this pill.
And that's
people looking for that short pill as well.
And look, I had high blood pressure a few years ago, and I take a pill for that now. And it just, you know what? I am better with my health in my 40s than I was definitely in my my 20s, I ate like crap.
Yeah.
Like everybody else in the world.
Chicken wings and bar food and burgers.
I remember being hungry at 9, 10 o'clock at night and say, I'm going to Taco Bell.
Yeah.
Ugh, the idea of Taco Bell right now sounds disgusting.
Yeah.
But, and I did a cold stop on a lot of fast food places about 10, 15 years ago. I mean, I'll still go every once in a while. But, like, I had to do a pickup for some of my contractors. I told them I would get them some food. So they wanted McDonald's. So I got them 2 number 1 Big Macs, and I got myself some fries. And that was it. Because that's all I really want from them. And I don't even think that's real food. But
no, it's not.
I just needed something. But, and I just, like, I couldn't figure out what else to get from there. But, because I was on the road. But the other thing is that, look, I mean, I took that. It does help lower it. But it also, like, look, I have to eat better. I'm always doing better with that. And, like you said, there's doctors. I had a doctor who told me, well, I want you to come in and pay me $75 and we'll do a food and nutrition thing. I said, well, my sister-in-law is actually a nutritionist. And he's, like, kind of mocking her.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, if you're not having respect for other people, I'm like, I'm a little confused on why I should trust you to do that. She's licensed to do this. And he's like, well, I'm a doctor. I can tell you about all the stuff you need. I've been studying up on it. I'm like, great. But you're not a licensed nutritionist, so I'm just like...
The ego is never a good thing to deal with in those cases. This power of authority or this argument from authority is just horrible. And I actually have an uncle or a cousin that's a general practitioner, and it's funny because years ago I asked him, because I heard that statistic, like how many classes on nutrition did you have to take out of your 6 years of schooling to become a general practitioner? And his answer was... He's like, he knew where I was going. He's like, I think I took 1, and I'm pretty sure it was an elective. It wasn't even a required class.
Yeah.
And that's just common sense says that's ridiculous, So I've recently switched doctors to a great guy. We've had some crazy conversations about everything that's going on. He's a great guy, and some things he won't say on the record. I'm trying to get him on the podcast because he's very up on. He does a full blood work panel of everything. So you're checking liver function and kidney function and vitamin content, and I actually just asked him too if he tests for heavy metals, and he's like, the insurance definitely will not cover that. And I was like, well, even if it's something that is somewhat reasonable, like I would be willing to pay $250 out of pocket or something maybe.
Yeah.
And he's like, no, it's probably more like $700. But like just for heavy metals, just so you could if you have lead, or there was a story Rogan just told about having arsenic in his blood, and they're like, he's like, is my wife trying to poison me or what's going on? And it turned out that he was eating a lot of sardines and olive oil, which high protein, high omega-3 fatty acids, good oils. It's kind of a healthy thing, but mercury and arsenic and some of the other heavy metals from coal production, whatever's the causes, and some of that. But yeah, it's something you should be aware of, because if you're slowly poisoning yourself because your water supply's got a lot of lead in it, and all you got to do is put a whole house filter on, and you can alleviate a lot of the problems. But if you're unaware of it, you're just creating further problems down the line.
We're talking to someone about doing a full gut rehab in Bronzeville. Is it Bronzeville? It's close to Bronzeville. But one of the things that she wants to do is, she's like, look, I've owned this house for 90 years. I know there's lead coming in. I said, it's like we need to, because her dad, she inherited it from her dad. It's like a 2-flat, but they use it more as like a single family. But the point is, for her, she's like, she wants to leave this as like a legacy for her son. And she's in her 70s, and she's like, one of the things we're going to do is we're going to have to go in and we're going to change out the lead pipes and everything like that, because the pressure isn't good, and it also, I just don't trust it anymore. And it's never been done. And it's a big deal for her. I mean, and she knows. It's just, and we're starting to see that more, where people are, Chicago is very big on that, and there's definitely a program, and I am talking specifically about Chicago. If you do have a lower level income and you're having those kind of problems from your lead service delivery, they do have programs right now to fund that. I mean, it takes time to get it through.
Yeah.
But that's something that we're starting to look at, because like people need that, and the city of Chicago will fund anyone who's below 80% of the median income.
Yeah, and it's a little suspect too when they send you a free water filter in the mail. If Chicago did that,
Did they?
yeah. So and so in a sense, because they have to notify you by water tests, and so they did notify you, and then if they sent you a filter, it's almost like that's protecting them from liability after they notified you, but then also provided you with this filter so that you should not be drinking any of that water coming out of your tap. And it's like, and I could show you the system I put is very reasonably priced, but obviously I did plumbing for 15 years on the side, so anything 1 inch and below as far as a main coming in, well, 1 inch is fine for a single family house, but if you're getting,
it's 1 inch. You said below. Sorry.
Yeah. 1 inch is fine because most of the time, most of the houses in Chicago are 3/4. Most of them only actually 5/8 meter coming in, and so water pressure and how that works with volume, and you never really should downsize it and go back up, because you're cutting off. It's not like gas pipe is different that you have volume. So if you have a 1.25 meter, and you step down to 1 inch for the service, you're good. And then water pressure in Chicago has a lot to do with the galvanized pipe and calcification, and a lot of times you can isolate where the main problem is. It's always going to be on the hot side. You get rid of some of the elbows on the horizontals, and you could really help alleviate a lot of those pressure issues without changing all the pipes in the house. But
she's at the point where she's like, we're doing it now because we're doing the rest of the house.
Then it's worth doing for sure.
Just like she knows it's going to cost money, but it's like, you know what? It's peace of mind. But I get what you're saying.
I just have 2 whole house filters that are just 1 inch inlets with the larger the 6-inch filters, and I have 1 sediment filter, 1 carbon filter, and that's better than nothing for sure. And I didn't, when you get into well systems and different things, it could get more complicated because there's salt systems and salt water softeners, and then you can't really be watering your lawn with softened water because that's salt. So now you're killing all your vegetation. So you have to isolate your outside hose bibs. And then if you have a more expensive water filter system, you don't necessarily want to be filtering the water you're spraying on the lawn either, because you're just utilizing your filters, but also you're filtering out some of the nutrient that might be beneficial to the garden. So, but that gets into more, we're
going to
the weeds with
detail. And also keep in mind, this is City of Chicago water, which is coming from the lake, versus like you're talking about well water, which could be. I know a lot of suburbs, like what was it? I grew up in Arlington Heights, so Prospect Heights. We always had this conversation about how the water tasted different in Prospect Heights because it was well water.
Yeah.
It was, you could discernibly taste it, like how it tasted different. Because in Arlington Heights, you had the lake water. In Prospect Heights, they never switched, so it was all well water, and it tasted very different. And you would know the difference if you go back and forth. So it's just something to be aware of.
Yeah, and you could test it yourself. You could do free samples at the county, or you could pay out of pocket to have more advanced tests done if you're concerned about it. But it's worth being aware. That's all. And then it's funny because we don't know what's good and bad. So with saltwater aquarium, I do have some experience with water filtration, reverse osmosis, deionization, all these sorts of things. And I have a TDS meter. TDS stands for total dissolved solids. So you could dip this into a cup of water, and it'll give you a number, parts per million, of foreign stuff in the water. It doesn't tell you what it is. It could be calcium. It could be good things. It could be a little bit of iron, which is beneficial, especially with well water. Or it could be arsenic. It could be lead. It could be whatever. But when you do have a reverse osmosis filter, you can get the TDS to 0. So that's just water. But there is some talk about nutrients and electrolytes and some things that should be in water. So it's funny, there was an episode on that Efren and that other, what's the guy's name? They run around the world searching for miracle foods kind of thing in the jungle and these different fruits and different things. So there was one episode where very healthy kind of thing, but there's a guy that's actually calls himself like a sommelier or whatever it's called for wine. He does that for water. And so they did this whole episode on where he brought natural spring waters in from various places around the world. Yeah. And then how they taste different, right? Some might have some sulfur taste to them, which might not be pleasant to some people. Yeah. but it's the sulfur springs in like the Nordic regions that claim that could be very beneficial. So we have to do studies on this stuff. We don't really know what's great and what's not. But some of the waters actually were testing. He started off with like 150 parts per million, then went to 500, then 1,200. Then he had some that were in excess of like 30,000 parts per million of stuff in this water. But again, if it's coming from a natural spring, what is that stuff? You don't really know.
So my aunt just went to Iceland, and I was looking at this. It's like Iceland and like I think it was there's some other country, but they have some of there have some of the best skin ever because they all do the natural springs, and they're doing that, and they do in the ice baths and everything like that, and it's just the combination of that, and probably there's something in the water as well, but it makes their skin glow, it makes them feel better, they're healthier, and that's partly because of the water. So
right.
It's a big deal.
Yeah, it's an essential. I had a friend that had a saltwater aquarium that was on a well. And he didn't do like reverse osmosis because there's so much sediment in that water, and you really clog the filters up very quickly, and so he didn't bother, and people are like, you can't do that. Like there's the main problem is like nitrates and fertilizers and phosphates that create algae, right? Because they feed off that. It's almost like putting Miracle-Gro in your tank which you don't want. But his water seemingly was very high in calcium, so he almost didn't even have to supplement calcium, and his tank was jamming as a result of having high calcium because the corals all like calcium to grow. So that but that's kind of interesting. Kind of going back to Chicago, get off the water thing, I guess. When we talk about diversity and we talk about racism and we talk about all these different things that's all in the media nowadays, and they seem to be using it to divide us when most people, are good people. And Chicago is an interesting one that I haven't really talked about on the podcast much because it's so amazing that they're trying to create, this diversity, even though one of the best attributes to Chicago growing up, or even 15 or 20 years ago, was the concept of the Chicago neighborhoods.
Yeah.
And that the South Side and the culture and Pilsen, the Latino community with their own history museums and their own art exhibits and their own food and culture and Chinatown and Koreatown. And so you had all these ghettos, which was a benefit to immigrants coming to a place that could move into a neighborhood that spoke their native language. Yeah. And so, which one conversation that's really not happening very much that I hear, but the idea was to make it easy to come here and survive, but then at some point assimilate to some of the American culture, right? So you can hold on to your native culture and yet still be considered an American as opposed to, whatever the case may be. But now they try to diversify, they try to split all the neighborhoods up and bring, poor communities and spread it around into better, more affluent communities, which definitely help them and make it a little bit easier because there's better schools and this and that. What do you think your thoughts are on some of the diversity of Chicago neighborhoods?
First of all, it's always funny when two white guys talk about diversity.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, well,
I just have to point out the irony of this, and I'll dive into it. Sorry, look. Here's the thing. I can't really talk about like I know there are a lot of people who grew up in like we were talking about Chinatown and Koreatown and all those different neighborhoods, and you're right, and they're still pretty strong. I mean, we live right by Vietnam Town, so he's like they have all the restaurants in that one area up by Argyle, and it's amazing to see that type of culture. I mean, I love going up there. I mean, we love taking our daughter and up there, and son's a little too young, but it's great to see. I do feel like the fact that, you had a lot of changes in the last few years, but, part of it is that change is inevitable. So, I mean, here's the thing. The neighborhood that existed, I don't know about you, the first people I don't know if ancestors is the right word, we're talking about great-grandparents that came to this country, they came. I think my great grandparents came here in the 1880s or 1890s. So I'm a few generations removed. I mean, my grandfather immigrated here, but he was born 1902, 1900. There's some debates on his birth certificate because we think he lied about his age. He made himself look younger. Yeah. But
he's not the first.
Not the first. But I mean, here's the thing. It's just like, I can't testify like, hey, was it great? Was it not? Because, like, I know that they talked about it. My grandparents talked about it. They were part of it. My parents grew up a little bit in that because it was a Jewish community. There's a lot of it, especially you're pretty. Is this Jefferson Park? No.
Oriole Park.
Yeah. So I mean, my dad grew up what's now West Ridge, and my mom grew up a little bit north of Albany Park. So pretty close to here, and those are two very Jewish communities in the northwest side of the city. So we definitely I mean, my grandparents still lived in the place where my dad grew up when I was younger. I mean, they sold it years ago, but I remember going over there, and we'd go to the synagogue, and I would say, why do I have to go to the synagogue? Because I was 3 or 4 years old and didn't understand it. My dad said, well, maybe you'll start to absorb the language. That did not work. But I mean, the thing was, I think he wanted to just try and teach me about that culture because, like, he grew up in that culture, and he doesn't even speak that much Hebrew. He speaks a little bit Yiddish. I speak less. And so I part of it is that I know those cultures existed, but I could tell you that, like, the first generation, like, you look at history, first generation stays close to the people they know, and that's what and the second generation, they're the ones who will start going out there and start doing stuff. And what you're really starting to see right now is the reason why you're starting to have a breakup of some of those neighborhoods is you're getting into the second, third generations. It's not that there's anything wrong. It's not that people are doing anything bad. It's just it's a natural flow of history. And I'm a former history teacher. So, I mean, I look at this and I say, it's not about, you could try and make it about race. You could try and make it about diversity. I don't see it that way. I see it as, like, as people change, they're going to start changing where they live. And, because, like, the American dream is not about, hey, you're going to define what you do and you're going to stay right where you are right now, and that's it. And you can't move anywhere. No, if we did all of that, everyone would still be living with their parents. It's not like Europe in the Middle Ages where everyone still lived with their family their entire lives. In this day and age, people move around and they do stuff. So
that makes a lot of sense because the lack of children willing to take over the family business, right? It's very low these days. They don't quite understand that it helps for generational wealth, that you're catapulted off the hard work of a previous generation or your parents to do a lot. And so that's where generationally most generations were always getting better. So like in my experience, and it's one of those things where that's another cool thing about the podcast is I want to have uncomfortable conversations sometimes.
Yeah.
Because sometimes people just avoid that. Yeah. Now even just the fact that coming from a Jewish culture is different in a lot of different ways. And what are those differences and what are the benefits and what are good, what are bad? Like I had a friend that
By the way, I tell people I'm Jewish.
Jewish-ish? Jewish-ish?
I mean, I am Jewish. I speak Hebrew. I mean, I'm not well.
Maybe not devout religious in a sense of cultural.
Yeah, and I've had this conversation because some of my wife's family, keep in mind, her dad, he was born from 2 survivors of the Holocaust. So it was a very different scenario. My entire family had moved here before 1913, 1920.
Gotcha.
So it's a very different experience being Jewish, living here in the United States for 3 or 4 generations versus being a second generation.
Or a direct descendant of survivors.
Yeah, and I know, like my business partner, his parents were both survivors as well. And there's things I think he dealt with that, I can't even imagine.
It's a different experience for sure.
Yes, because people don't understand, there was a lot of trauma that was never resolved, and they didn't have access to therapy like we do today.
Yeah, and I do believe learned behavior is passed down genetically, and I believe that some trauma can be passed down genetically as well as a result. Obviously, that would just make sense. But an interesting story is like sometimes we don't know our friends are Jewish. Okay, not that there's anything wrong with that. It's almost like the Brendan Fraser movie where he was at Harvard or whatever, yes. And they're like, oh, wow, you're Protestant, and I didn't even know. Imagine that.
I remember watching that movie and thinking, oh, I'm really excited to be Jewish.
But it's a great flick for sure, and there's discrimination and racism and religiousism, or whatever we call discrimination or religious discrimination, and that's something that's part of the history. There's no question about that, and that's why, like, even sometimes today, it seems people are tentative. The idea of having an American flag outside your house being some sort of right conservative thing is insanity, right? Like I can be proud to be an American. It doesn't mean I'm proud for everything that this country or government has done in its history. You know, that we've made some mistakes, unquestionably, and hopefully we could learn from them and do better. But overall, things are going pretty well in a lot of areas, right?
I'm going to say I hope Trump doesn't ruin it.
Well, right.
I'm sorry. I didn't vote for him, and I don't know if you did or not. It doesn't matter. But it's just like...
So the way, when we talk about, even when we're talking about altruistic service, right? In a sense, politics is supposed to be like that. Yes. I have an interesting, a quick little story about it. Even in my property in Colorado, we have a vacant property. And at some point, one day, we're going to build a cabin. I got some plans. I'm going to drill a well. I got a backhoe out there. I got some things going slowly. But it's not easy to build in the mountains, and it's not easy to just scrape cash together and all these sorts of things with 3 kids and blah, blah, blah. So the first year we went out there, we tent camped on our property.
Which, by the way, 2 kids in daycare right now. He's starting next month, $3,500 a month in Chicago.
Oh, my God.
It's more than my mortgage. Just to be on the same page, when people say they don't want to move to Chicago, I do understand. I mean, I'm not telling you that, but it's just the cost of living is insane.
Well, and then the government intervention and subsidized daycare is only going to make the price go up more than likely.
They don't even fully subsidize it. I mean, you think about the fact that the good news is that when she turns 4, City of Chicago gives free pre-K to all kids, but we have to do a lottery to see which school she goes to, so we don't even know. Like, having a 4-year-old do a lottery for pre-K is the stupidest idea I've ever heard, because I'm not gonna... because, like, first of all, you don't even know their full capabilities at 4. I'm not saying that. Like one of the funniest things was when we first did daycare, when she was, like, I want to say 4 or 5 months old, we had parent-teacher conferences with the teachers, and they're like, what exactly are you going to report to her? She doesn't poop as much in the morning as she does in the afternoon? I mean, they said everything was positive, but it's like, you don't know enough about this yet.
Yeah, all this evaluation and early childhood education, and a lot of things are weird because they work, and there's a lot of people that spend a lot of time and educated themselves on a lot of different things. Yeah. And sometimes you go to preschool and kindergarten, and everybody's just playing, and they're not really doing anything, and you're like, what's going on here? But next thing you know, they're reading. Yeah. So those slight, as a teacher, you very well must be aware that attention span and introducing some knowledge in a game or building these skills in different 100%. Ways, all amazing stuff, and there's a lot of smart people thinking about it. But like you said, it's so amazing that I've watched a shift, and I've always been anti-labeling. And so, especially with academics, because the Khan Academy, I don't know if that story from the old TED Talk. So the story is real quick is he went to some family reunion in Atlanta or something. He was from California, and this was when YouTube was just coming out. And so he met some distant relatives that their kids were struggling in math, and he's like, well, I'm a math teacher. Maybe I can help them. Because, God forbid, we help each other and help family, right? Yeah. So he goes, there's this new thing, YouTube, out there. So if it's like I could post a video, and he could watch the video and just do the assignments, and I could tutor him from California.
Yeah. And
they're like, whoa, that's weird. Wow, imagine technology. This is crazy. So he does these videos, and he starts going through the settings, and he's like, public or private? He's like, well, why would I do it private? If somebody else can get something out of my videos, great.
Yeah.
As it turns out, he was really great at explaining basic mathematic principles, and the way he did his videos, he was a teacher, and his videos start going viral just because they're awesome. Then at some point you have to find a way to compile all these videos and put it in a website and organize things and all these different things. And he's always committed that it's always going to be free. And if you're out there and your kids are struggling in any area, I was even doing some videos on economics and stuff, just because I was at work and sitting on a service truck with, there's time. Do you want to better yourself, or do you want to sleep, or do you want to, scroll on TikTok, which we can't do anymore?
100 Audible books because I listen to them. I mean, some of them I repeat, but it's like...
Yeah, I always have earbuds in. I'm always listening to a podcast or a speaker or an audiobook or whatever. It's important. But so anyway, the Khan Academy the TED Talk is unbelievable, telling that story. But one of the things that he notices, that was the point, is that you label somebody deficient in math, they'll never be good at math. And what he had found is that some people just are different on this curve.
Yeah.
The way their brains develop. Like for me, for instance, when I was in college, I never really took that many notes because I was so concentrating on trying to understand what the professor was saying. And if I understood what he was saying, then I didn't have to remember it, because now it just makes sense.
Yeah.
That's how my brain works. Other people are more at memorizing dates. History is a prime example.
Yeah.
You can read a people's history of the United States and read the real story from journals and letters, and you're like, oh my God, this is so fascinating. And somehow we're not taught that fascinating aspect of history a lot of times.
So I'm going to add a personal story to that.
Go for it.
So when... I just have to remember the dates, right? Speaking about history. So when I was in 5th grade, I loved math. Up to 5th grade, I loved math. I was really great at basic numbers. I mean, I did great. When I got to 6th grade, they put me in the advanced math group, which I passed. I passed, but it was because the teacher would give extra credit, and I would do all the extra credit. And he noticed that, I wasn't. He told me, he said, "Look, you are a very hard worker. You did nothing wrong, but we're going to have to place you back in math." From that moment on, I hated math. And it was because of the fact, he didn't do anything wrong. He was probably right. I probably wasn't fully ready. But at the same point...
You perceived it as a failure.
I perceived it as a failure because I was 12 years old. And it was, I remember being little and you'd cry. I remember being 12 years old. This was one of the last time I remember as a kid crying, because I was just so devastated that you basically told me I had to repeat the same year. And I did. I had to repeat the same class the next year. And I think I got A's and B's in it. I think I got one semester or one quarter I didn't do that great, just because I still didn't fully understand the concept.
Right.
But for the most part, I had to repeat it, and I still did pretty good. But I still had that image in my head that I'm not that great at math anymore. And because I didn't proceed with the people I was with before, that it wasn't that important. And it like I said, I was a history teacher. So when I did history, when I went into high school, I did AP, I did AP US, I did AP Euro, I think I did one other one. But I had by the time I went to college, I had all my basic history courses laid out because I had already done it. So I actually saved like a semester of college just because I had done that, and I also had AP English. I had AP English as well. So the thing was that you have that vision of who you are. And that's the thing that kills me with these tests. They create a vision of who you are, and I remember my mom saying, "No, don't worry, it's fine, it's understandable," and she was doing her best to try and calm me down and explain that you didn't do anything wrong. But at the same point, you get that vision in your head, and I see that happening to kids. It's just you have that, and I've been trying to tell my daughter, by the way, you can't use the word can't. You must recant the can't. And she's 3.5. So
nice.
I was joking around to her the other day, and she said I was I was doing it in a funny voice, and saying, "Don't do that. You can't do that." And she said, "You can't use the word can't."
Nice.
And she caught me on it. But she even at 3.5, she's starting to. It
shows how sharp they are. They're born geniuses. We make them dumber every day. That's my theory.
But I don't like the idea of having to have her be tested to see. I know she's smart.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. You asked me, I'm 100% not biased. My daughter's a genius.
Yeah.
I know that. I know that there are things that she could probably be better at, and there's things that she can't. And I can tell you already we have a 3-month-old and with a boy. He's probably going to be more athletic than her.
Well, I think that what you're talking about with labeling is part of the problem, 100%. That if you think you're bad at math, you just never will be. It's a self-limiting belief that gets programmed into you that's not true.
And to add to that, by the way, I'm sorry. One more thing. I was a mortgage broker for 6-7 years, and then in addition to that, all the math I have to do as an investor, all the math I have to do as a business owner. I'm the one who does all the bookkeeping for our company right now. I'd like to be able to offload that at some point because I'd love to not do that. But I have to understand that, and I have to understand all the finances. So whatever they did say about, I might not know. If you ask me to tell you all the calculus stuff, I might not be able to tell you all that stuff. But if you ask me
for practical math,
I'm really good at it.
Yeah.
But it took me a long time to kind of
bridge
as an
that
adult to try and bridge that gap. Because I didn't see it in myself.
Right.
And I realized, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm really good at, like, I would talk to people about some stuff for finances and talk about how, like with the property, like we're doing a property right now. We bought it for $30,000. We know it's $150,000 to rehab. And then I did the CMA as a realtor to say, hey, here's the value. And then the appraiser pretty much came out and said the same thing. So it's worth $310. I think it could maybe $320 if we stretch it. But if we sell that property, this is how we're going to make $100,000 off that. Now, do we find that property every week? No. But like we know how to do the numbers on that. And, my partner and I, we bought that property in less than a month. We had a rush to get financing because he put the contract in place before we had the financing. So we had a rush to do it, but we had to basically make the decision that day. And we're on the phone going back and forth with numbers on what everything costs. And like for us, when we do it for a client, we have to write out a full proposal for our contracting company. But for the two of us, like that was one of the biggest challenges when we started the contracting company, because the two of us would sit there and say, HVAC is this, electrical is this, plumbing is this. Don't forget the permit. Then you have to do drywall. Then you have to do painting. Then you have to do insulation. And then we go through the costs and we'll figure it out. And then this needs a porch. So with this, that's gonna be another $15,000 to $20,000.
So you guys could, but you could just like do a shared Google sheet and then people enter the numbers and then everybody gets to look at it.
Yes.
Which is probably the easiest way. I actually have a friend, Paul, that we'll grab coffee or something sometime because we were talking about doing a few more things and he's got a little bit of time on his hand and he's a freak when it comes to account. He is a CPA and with spreadsheets and data analysis and stuff. So it's like if that's something that can fill in a gap and free up some time, because like, even when we were talking about the time, but before, it's like whether we're doing our own tile work or whether if we can generate more income by doing other things, then only makes sense to outsource certain things. That's just smart business and efficiency and management. But when we were,
I'm not a licensed electrician. I'm not a licensed plumber or HVAC. Truthfully, you don't want me doing any of that.
Right? Yeah, for sure.
I'm just being like, look, we have guys who are amazing at doing that. Like, one of the things I had struggled with the idea of signing a general contracting company. I'm like, well, I'm not licensed at anything.
You don't need to be,
you
right?
Don't need to be. Well, general contractor, you have to be licensed. But at the same point, but I had the guys who could do it. And that was the thing. It's like, I know where to find those people because I've worked in this industry and I've done that and I had the right people. So, that's one of the things. It's like, it actually was kind of one of the most interesting because when I did the marketing, I did a lot of stuff myself.
Right.
I was the copywriter. I was a social media person. And that was one of the problems with my business. It only grew as far as I could grow because I couldn't find people that I liked to hire on that would work.
Yeah, managing a team and growing. These are some of the things, regardless of what people think of Elon Musk or some of these people that accomplish massive tasks. They're not doing most of the work. Okay, whatever. But somebody's got to facilitate that. Somebody's got to find the greatest people to do these tasks and stuff and to really achieve things and to grow. But just to close the loop on the labeling thing, like with the Khan Academy thing, they were documenting now that there's a website now, and then you take tests on the website, and then you have to get X amount right in this area before you move on to the next section. And time on page is all tracked with websites in Google. So now you have all this additional data with how long has he taken to answer this question. And then you can have all the students in the same class doing the same work. And then they're like, okay, so now you could say, well, Tommy's kind of struggling in this area, but Mary and Joey are really doing great on it. So maybe we could team them up in a little classroom assignment and they can help each other. And then so you'll get the negative people. Oh, so you want the kids teaching each other instead of the teach?
100%.
Yes. Sometimes the teacher the way they're explaining it just needs a different perspective. And then all of a sudden something clicks. And now this kid that was definitely going to be put in a remedial math class is now skyrocketing and is above everybody else because he's confused at the process. Then he understands the process and he'll never forget it. These other kids might just be good at memorizing equations and memorizing why things work or their multiplication tables. And so they can do the work, but they don't really have a grasp and an understanding of the process. And so he's actually more advanced even though he's testing lower.
And that happens a lot.
It happens a lot.
And by the way, that like one of the as someone who has a master's in education, I could tell you one of the greatest advances in education right now in education theory is having there's different levels of understanding. It's Howard Gardner, Robert Gardner. I think it's whatever it is. I can't remember. Multiple Intelligences. If you ever read that, but it's a genius book. I've referenced it in multiple different ways of using it. When I was in marketing, I talked about it a lot. And one of the things that is amazing about it is when you hear something, you understand maybe 17% of it. When you see something, you get I think it's 30%. When you hear it and see it and you can interact with it, you get 50 or 60. But when you teach it, you remember 90%. And that's one of the things, the reason why teachers are so much better at a lot of topics than their students, they're the ones teaching it. So not only one, do you have to prepare the lesson, but also in addition to preparing the lesson, you then have to teach it and re-explain it to people. So you have to think about how do we make this more accessible to our students so they'll understand it. That's one of the, it's like I said, I have a 3-year-old now. So how do I explain stuff to a 3-year-old? I'm constantly saying stuff and I'm realizing, I just made it way too complicated for a 3-year-old. How do I make it more understandable? And it's just you have to go back. So it's you understand more because of the fact that you taught it. Having students teach each other is actually one of the most proven ways to help them learn how to understand the topic.
Because they're coming from where they're coming from equal ground. And you lose that power of authority that might be intimidating too. And, there's a million things we could see how that should work better.
There's definitely a lot of psychology involved.
Yeah. And the student, but on the flip side of that, the student is always better than the teacher, right? And why is that? Well, it's because once that student teaches, right, now he's going to become better than the teacher in a sense that he knows what the teacher knows, but then he also brings all his experiences into the mix too. So it's really incredible. And just learning, education, all those sorts of things. So one question I guess that comes to mind is, as a history teacher and I would assume a lover of history,
Of course.
Why do you like history so much? And is your brain the brain type that it comes easy to memorize dates, or are you more interested in the story? Because obviously through evolution, the storytelling was a way for people to remember stuff through allegories or through whatever sorts of processes of remembering stories that are fun. My brain is more of you tell me a good story and I'll never forget it. I always joke I'm full of more useless information than anybody, and I usually could recall that. I could usually recall that useless information much easier than a certain equation that I memorized or something along those lines. So how does your brain process work, and what do you like so much about history?
So, okay, so there's two. When I was younger, I would say it's definitely more the dates. Because I remember doing when I was 15, I was in a history class, and this is before I took the AP one. So this is one of the they had me in a regular general world history course, and the teacher before every test would do to help get kids extra credit, they would allow us to do teams. So we would do a little quiz bowl beforehand. And all the kids wanted to be on my team because that meant that I would just answer all the questions. Actually, I did Scholastic Bowl because I was the history person. And I remember there was even some times where I answered the question before the guy finished because it was like he mentioned one word and I'm like, oh, you're talking about this.
Yeah.
Like, I remember it was like the War of like 1812 or something like that in Europe or something. I don't remember it anymore.
Yeah, so trivia is one form of...
Yeah, but I will say as I get older,
Yeah.
it's definitely the story because, you know, like even doing general contracting, I'm tying it back to that because like we deal with a lot of older houses because it's city of Chicago and a lot of these are Victorian. There are a lot of, and for me, like I walk through a house and it's in damaged condition and I could show you some of the pictures. Like some of these properties are just in horrible condition. And it's like, I try and picture who lived there. I try and picture what their life was like in there. I try and even just like see, hey, this is what like first of all, like if this is the layout of the house, what type of family do you think would live here? I mean, who would be able to live there? Because like, you know, if you have a 2-bedroom 1-bath apartment, it's a very different scenario that, or even we've done 2-bedroom 1-bath houses, which are interesting. And it's very different than a 5-bed, like we have some rentals that are 5-bedroom 2-bath or 5-bedroom 3-bath. And those are very different types of families.
No question.
I mean, ideally, you're not going to have the same number of people in each but back in the day, you could have had 10 people. And I've seen places where, like, you go in and they have curtains in one room.
Yeah.
Because they're dividing the room into like half or three.
Well, my first house in by Harlem and Addison, we had bunk beds in our living room.
Yes.
And then we had the nursery because it really was only a 2-bedroom, 1.5 bath. The half bath was a toilet in the basement, and the laundry sink was the sink, so they could call it a half bath. There was a small room with just the shitter in there. And so,
Yes.
so that's that $10,000 that I invested because I put a corner shower unit in there and a sink and a bathroom, and then I had a fish room, and I did underground plumbing and fixed everything there. But the point being is that it was a predominantly Italian neighborhood.
Yeah.
And I guarantee there were 6 kids living in that house that we couldn't seem to find enough space for. So now in this, you know, consumer world that we live in with hyper consumerism and everything else, we think we need 5,000 square feet or 3,000 square feet per kid. And it's just absolutely not the case, you know. So we moved from that house to this house.
My wife and I are debating because I have the Honda CR-V. I don't know if you saw it when I came in.
Uh-huh.
It's I think it's fine. We're almost paid off on that car. So like I think end of this year, beginning of next year, it should be paid off. And to me, the greatest thing in the world is when you pay off a car because then you could drive it around for 8 years, you pay for some maintenance or whatever it is, and you say like I've had 3 cars since I graduated college. The first one only lasted 7 years, and that was because it had a complete engine breakdown.
And that was buying new, you're saying?
Yeah, buying new.
Okay.
I bought a Honda Civic that I had for 13 years, 14 years, something like that. And my wife and I had got to the point where it's just like we kept fixing stuff, and there was it was end of life. And we're like we came back from Geneva, Illinois for a trip for the 2 of us. This is before we had kids. And it was 95 degrees and the air conditioning in the car broke, and I kind of broke down. I said, let's buy the car. Let's buy a new car. And so this is we're on the 3rd car right now. We've had it for 4 or 5 years. But it's I'm telling you, like, I love the feeling of like you have a car and it's paid off and then you don't have to worry about it. It's just there's a little bit of relaxation in knowing that. Like,
Yeah.
Same thing if you have a house that like is paid off. It's just
Well, just as without being a financial planner or helping somebody financially, if you can have the discipline of knowing that this car payment that no longer exists should be directly put into something worthwhile, whether it's paying down debt or whether it's saving up for an investment property or something along those lines. Because, you know, that's where the, 20% the God, or 20% the savings, 10% the God, live off the rest.
Yeah.
The Richest Man in Babylon. Some of these books that are just mind blowing. About how simple it is to gather wealth, regardless of if you're making minimum wage or whether you're a CEO.
And I will tell you, my wife and her family are like, well, you need to get a bigger car because we have 2 kids now. And I'm like, why? There's a seat for each kid, and because there's only a little space in the middle, so if we can't bring other people in. I said, well, that's not my problem.
Yeah.
Like for the 2 to 3 times a year where her mom is in town right now, so it's like we want to. She can't really fit in there that well. And I'm like, so my wife will sit back there.
But you have 3, right?
two.
Oh, I thought you had a third. Okay.
No, I was good with one, and I was told that was incorrect.
Okay. I agree.
We have a boy and a girl. We're good.
2.2 population decline. So we had 3 because we want to be above the curve. But
we have 2. I figured, boy and girl, 100% fine. That's all.
That's beautiful.
That's all you need. Like I don't need to keep going. Like I know someone I was talking to has 4 girls, and they're debating if they're. I think
probably for a boy.
I think there's a boy. Like I think they're having twins now. I think they have two right now, and they're having some of my contractors. He's 2 girls right now, and they're having twins. I think one of them's a boy, and one of them's a girl. I forgot what the scenario is exactly, but they're like, yeah, if that didn't happen, and they're both girl twins, we're gonna see if we should go for a 5th.
Yeah.
Oh, that to me is not. No, I'm sorry, especially knowing all the costs of everything.
So you were talking about old Chicago buildings and stuff, and if you went, no, that's cool. But listen to the episode with Tom Vakala. He's from Restore Masonry.
Okay.
Is a pretty big company in Chicago that does a lot of brickwork and masonry. But he was talking a lot about the older buildings and the different styles and how those. It's character. It's wonderful.
Whenever you could save a little bit of that old part of the house. I mean, there's some that it's too broken down.
Yeah.
But if you could save a little bit of that old place and put it in the new, it makes it so much better.
Yeah.
It gives it a little pop, especially when you go to sell it.
We talked about that too, just because cheap construction and box on house and cinder block and
Cinder block house.
Just all this sorts of that's how we did it in the old country and all this other stuff, and box on house I call it when they do second story additions that just look horrible because there's no character.
Yeah.
So even just one extra peak or one something, like put something, do something, and that's what we talked about, the construction of the old days when a little bit of limestone, a little bit of break pattern, a little bit of something instead of nothing.
But the cost for that now.
Yeah, it's
prohibitively expensive than they were. But here's the thing: even if you don't do it right away, if you build the second edition, if you're planning on living there, at some point
you could
maybe
prep
invest
for
in
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be. I understand if your budget's $150 and that second floor costs $150 and that's it, and you're like, okay, I just don't have the budget right now. But if you're living there, maybe in a year, maybe in 5 years, whatever it is, make it pop a little bit more. Because you're right, it's you could definitely tell the difference between new and old, and I understand it's not where you can't go back in time, but it's like at the same point. There are differences in the quality there, and you could definitely tell. Sometimes you go into those properties, and the foundation is still great.
Yeah,
they built it so well.
Yeah, and then that initial plan of putting a second story addition on that house, I still own that house. And when I did the downstairs and redid all the water lines, I ran chases up for the second story addition. I ran a home run for the electric for the second story addition. I insulated. It's okay. I insulated the floor and I screwed down 3/4 inch plywood decking on the whole attic, so it's all tight and it's ready for just walls. So that it's like prepped for the second story addition, which would save you a lot of time as long as
doing stuff in phases if you need to.
Yeah,
I understand. The cost of stuff is prohibitively more expensive than it was even 3 to 4 years ago.
Yeah.
COVID definitely changed a lot of the pricing structures because the supply and demand is not.
No question. Yeah.
We run into that all the time because we're helping some investors on the south side right now, and we've been working on we're working on one of their units, and we had to pause because they had an issue with their commercial unit below it. But we were basically every month we were doing a little bit here, a little bit there. They need to get something settled because they had some legal issues on the first floor with the tenant. They were actually, the property was raided.
Yeah.
Not the unit that we were fixing, the one below. Our guy was actually there, and he called my partner. He said, there's cops all over the place here.
Nice.
So they had to raid it, so they had to fix that, but they're having an attorney work with them first. So and then we're gonna talk to them, see if we can help them. But it's on pause. But we're doing a little bit every month, and that's the thing. It's just it's okay if you can't do it all at once. I get that.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're living there, it's a little bit different because there's some people look, if we're living there, you need to fix it in a day or 2 days because if there's a bathroom or something like that. But if you could delay it over time, it definitely makes a difference.
Yeah, no doubt. So I guess we did get a little separated from the from the history thing. Yeah.
So
So
the history, in
what?
terms of what you were talking about, the stories.
Yeah. Yeah.
I definitely love the stories. I mean, like I don't know if you ever read it. I wrote Startup Gap. And I wrote it a few years after.
I think that's the one that I contributed to for.
Was it?
There was
Okay.
one. Well, one of them was for overcoming obstacles. Was the chapter,
I think that might have been Startup Gap.
but the startup gap premise, if for those that don't know, I mean that was fascinating because, you can explain it better, I'm sure. But my take on it was that you really took an interest in the area in between great things happening.
Yes.
So from the inception of the idea to making ideas happen is a great book. There's a lot of different things and tools that people use for categorizing and making and persevering and determination and failing and get doors slammed in their face and continuing
Yeah.
and then things start working on and then they get an episode on Cribs or something and then bam, next thing you know they're super successful
Yes.
and everybody's like, oh, he got lucky.
That's exactly what the thing that we had the conversation about. It's so I interviewed about 20 people, and I need to go back to this book at some point because I need to edit it because I did do a good job.
Or a follow up even.
Yeah.
Where are they today?
That'd be another one as well. I would love to have a conversation with some of them because I know one of the people I interviewed, they were on Shark Tank. I don't think they got a deal, but I actually ended up watching that episode of Shark Tank a few years ago. It was interesting. But the thing that's kind of cool about this, and it's like, you're like you said, I had a conversation with was it Joel Com? I think I'm saying his name wrong. Man, I'm bad with names, just like you said.
Yeah.
It's so I had a conversation with Joel, and he's a digital marketing guy. We were very similar, really great guy. He actually grew up in the North Shore somewhere. And one of the things that he was talking about was, look, I started doing my business in the 90s and I had no money coming in. He had a moment similar to me where he had like $1.50 in his account at one point, and I had that also where a homeless man came up to me and I had like $1.75 in my account, and he said, can you give me 50 cents? And I'm like, I don't want to give you a third of my net worth. I mean, that's how broke I was at the time.
Yeah.
It was after I had to get rid of all my real estate properties, and I still hadn't built up my business. And I ended up at one point volunteering at a community kitchen to help to try and give back. But in terms of going back to this, the first Startup Gap is he was talking about how he had no money, and at one point eventually he was working, and someone in Japan called him randomly because he was about to give up, and they said, look, we'll pay you to write content for us. And this is at the beginning of the content revolution. So this is like the late 90s. And he said, okay, great. How much do you want to pay me for that? And then I think it was like $4,000 a month, which at that time was very significant for someone who had no money. And it was enough to pay his bills, so he was able to continue working. And he started developing, I know he started doing Google ads and everything else. And I think he made a few $1 million off of that. And whatever the case is, but it's like he had that one moment which saved him, and he was able to continue doing that. And that's one of the things that's so cool, is because a lot of the times people think like, hey, you are successful and you're great, and like look at Elon Musk. Everyone looks at him right now. Well, he's Elon Musk. No, Elon Musk basically lived in a house with his brother for like a year or two, starting, what was it, eZip or whatever the first one they tried to do.
Mm-hmm.
I know it was something with a zip. But
he ended up selling his house. He might not even own a house right now.
He doesn't own a house.
Yeah.
He sold all of his houses, so
Just though he doesn't have an income and you don't pay no taxes. You get people that are all negative and stuff.
But he basically, when he was starting, they worked, him and his brother, they lived out of their house and they basically worked there. And all they did for 18 hours a day for a year, 2 years, was code. And they coded that first project together. And this is in the mid-90s. They sold that, and then he needed another project. Now he had millions of dollars. Now, by the way, you have millions of dollars. You're in your 20s. You could do whatever you want in life.
It puts you a step ahead for sure.
Yeah. So
having a little capital to burn.
I mean, but people didn't really know who he was at that point. Still, so what does he go and do? He decides to start a payment processing company called PayPal.
Mm-hmm.
And PayPal obviously sold for billions of dollars. Now, at that point, you're talking about someone in their 30s with $1 billion, or I think it was a few hundred million. You didn't get all of it. but he had a few $100 million in his account, and he went back and he started investing in Tesla, Solar City, and SpaceX.
Yeah.
So, and he divided that. But, like, here's the thing. He did that in 2002. I don't remember hearing about Tesla until 2008, 2009. And even then, it wasn't something that was very common because only a few people had it. It wasn't really until you start getting to 2015, 2016 that Tesla started even beginning to get value. And now you talk about the fact he's the richest man in the world. Same thing with Jeff Bezos.
Well,
Bezos
did you ever?
Internet company until 2002.
Yeah. Did you ever play Slug Bug with Volkswagen Bugs, where you punch your brother and say Slug Bug Red and hammer?
We called it Punch Buggy.
Punch Buggy. Okay, same thing. So similar, a little different. I started that with my kids to keep it alive with Teslas a few years back, right? So it's like Tesla Red, bam, right? So then the kids are hitting mom. It's like, okay, take it easy. But it's pretty funny because we did that. You noticed how much more often you're seeing them on the street, where you'd see one or two a day, maybe.
Yeah.
In Chicago.
Yeah.
Not to mention some rural area or something where now I've seen at least 4 Cybertrucks that I know are different. It's not the same one. And so it's just amazing. And then it's definitely a different thing. There's no question. But it's funny. I saw older interviews, and kind of similar to your passion for the startup gap and that idea of perseverance and that idea of having a vision and trusting the muse kind of thing, to where holding true to the vision. I don't know if it was partly through you or through I'm pretty sure the founder of Home Depot had an interesting story of struggle with this vision of Home Depot. And he would go to investors and capitalists and looking for cash and looking for money. And they'd be like, you want to do a bigger hardware store? Like, do you see what True Value and Ace Hardware are doing right now? They're dying. Like, good luck. So nobody would back him, right? And then when he started his first store, I believe was out in California or out West Coast somewhere. Was it East Coast? It's somewhere.
I think Home Depot is based in Georgia.
Okay, but the story, I might be wrong on the story, or I might have crossed it up. Yeah. But the story was like the vision of the tiered rack system with the inventory up top.
Yeah.
But he had no money for inventory, but he had to hold true to the vision.
Yeah.
So he ended up contacting the manufacturer and getting product stickers and putting them on empty boxes. So it looked like it was full of inventory, even though he didn't have the money for it. So it seems silly, but it's something magical about holding true to that vision and trusting the vision. And then look what happens. Now you got Lowe's and Menards and Costco and Sam's Club. That whole system of shopping wholesale style, or at least a feel of wholesale style, revolutionized the marketplace.
Yeah, and you know what? The same holds true for, Microsoft was the same way. Apple was the same way.
Obviously, Google.
I mean, people looked at Apple though, and they said, like, why would I need a computer?
Yeah.
I mean, it's
silly.
It's silly, but you know what? And even Walmart. I mean, you hear the story about like Sam Walton now who started Walmart, and the idea was basically we're going to put Walmarts in rural locations. And people are like, why would you go to a rural location when everyone's moving out of the rural location? But the thing was, no one else had anything there. By the time Kmart, what was the penny, the dime stores, like the
dollar stores.
Yeah, the dollar stores like Benjamin Franklin type places. By the time they realized what was happening, he was so dominant that they couldn't catch up. I mean, he basically took over rural areas, and then once that was done, he went into the suburbs, and now that you have stuff in the city and stuff like that. I mean,
so some of those marketing tactics we could talk about. That's almost a whole nother podcast, because there's some evil that happened there, and then obviously union but it's funny because like Kmart was union. Yeah. And Kmart had if people remember history, when they first came out and they were just crushing it, doing it bigger, doing it better than everybody, being able to save because they're buying in bulk and have these advantages that smaller places didn't have. And they're killing Main Street. They're killing the mom and pop shop. They're doing all this sorts of thing. And it was like, they were the big bad demon then, even though they were union. And then Walmart comes across and they do it even bigger and better than them. So it's like at some point, how much can you criticize them? But then again, there was other tactics that, weren't great. But to go back to the Elon Musk, to watch some of these interviews and see how everybody said he's crazy on everything he's ever done. And he did it anyway. And when you hear him say that, and you hear these long form interviews that he had that were even before podcasting, I'm like, you're crazy if you don't let your kids listen to this guy talk, because it's encouraging.
I have a whole bunch of theories on Elon Musk. I'm not.
There's a lot, yeah.
There's a lot of good that he's done. There's a lot of things that lately I'm just. Well, one, I besides for the tax benefits, I don't understand why he supported Trump, but that's a whole different story.
I think it was more about the freedom of speech aspect of censorship that he does feel could be the end of democracy or the American way of life. And the Democrats weren't going to be the ones that get behind that.
Quick pause.
Yeah.
I have to get going soon.
Cool. We'll wrap it up very soon. We got obviously more than enough. So.
To your point, yeah, no, I get. Look, I get Kamala Harris had some issues with some of the things that she was saying. I fully understand that there are also problems with switching from Biden to Kamala Harris, because I know that like that seemed very wonky, especially when you're talking about how Trump is killing democracy, and then they kind of went to the democratic process. I mean, that said, Trump kind of forced the issue. And he kind of got bit. He got lucky because he could have gotten bitten in the butt by that. Because he was the one who basically said Biden should be running. So Biden said, "Okay, I'm not going to run." So,
yeah. It was almost like a dare, in a sense, right? So if you back up the history a little bit before that, it's funny that there wasn't a politician on the planet that would even mention immigration because it was too much of a controversial issue.
Yeah.
Right. It was death. Political suicide. Don't even talk about it. And so when you get this crazy person that comes out and starts talking about things he's not supposed to talk about because he just wants to get things fixed that he thinks should be fixed, it started a conversation that would not be here today had he not came on the scene. It's possible, but I
don't think anything he does is to help America. I think it's he does everything because it benefits him, but he knows if he says stuff to a certain percentage of Americans, they'll agree because, common sense wise says that immigrants don't provide value. The reality is, if you look at the numbers, immigrants provide more in tax dollars than they actually take.
Yeah, there's a lot of articles that are kind of sprayed out in a few different ways on that issue, and so one thing like your countryman Ben Shapiro, but he had a take on an interesting way that he talked about the history of immigration, right? So, we're all immigrants unless you're Native American. Okay, yes, there's truth to that. And a lot of poor people came here struggling, looking for better opportunity, Irish during the potato famine, all these different phases of the WAPs, the without passport Italians that came through, so all that happened. But they all came through Ellis Island. They all came through the gate and put their name on a list. That's different than swimming through a river. So that's one point. Okay, so. Yes and no. Yes and no, like to be screened or to have a background check or to know who they are.
I understand that they don't know who they are, but you know what? They wouldn't be coming here if they weren't facing some type of hardship in their life. Now, I'm not saying you should let in everybody, and I understand why you have to have limits, but I will say that, look, if someone's crossing the border with their kids and they're coming from a country where there's a war there and they had to cross all of Mexico to get there, which a lot of these people, they're coming from famine, they were coming from war, they're coming from poverty, they're coming from tyranny, then they're coming to this country because they're in desperate straits.
Yes.
And the thing is, we can't demonize people who are already struggling. That's the thing that annoys me. It's not... Yes, there are 1 out of 100,000 or 1 out of 1,000,000 is maybe a mass murderer, and that's the person we talk about. But at the same point, 999,000 of those people are probably
Those numbers might be a little off, only because obviously if it's if
that was honestly
no, right. I'll just for disclosure's sake that when you're coming from a war-torn area and murder is common,
yes,
it's a different culture.
yes.
And so whether they would be considered a criminal there or whether they'd be considered a criminal here, or if you're bringing some of the worst types of cultural things here, that's not great. Okay,
So
but
some of
it,
the better side of it also because there's a lot of people if you're first of all the people who are coming here are not the warriors and the soldiers who are decimating things. They're the people who are decimated for the most part. I'm not saying this is 100% true, but in most cases, the people who come here are people who were told, "Hey, look, you don't have a voice," and they come here without a voice and they don't know how to speak up.
and the main thing is the incentive of what they're coming for.
Yes.
Okay, so like if they're coming because they know there's a social safety net, they know they can get a free welfare food stamps to get started. They might be able to get a loan for start a business that maybe other people can't or can. There's a lot of different things that are controversial with all of that. And so one of the things Shapiro was talking about is when the mass migrations happened from Europe.
Yeah.
Those people were coming from a place that had social safety nets, food stamps, government cheese, socialized medicine,
Yeah.
or socialized health care.
They didn't have that in Russia.
But they're coming to a place that had nothing.
Yeah.
And they got in a wagon with their life savings and went west with the hopes of the American dream and the possibility of having ownership of land, which was a foreign concept from somebody coming from Europe, right? To have your own land.
Yeah.
And they had to pool their resources together, start a community, just to even build a church and a school, right?
what they're doing
There was
now.
no doctors, there was no hospitals, there was nothing. So that was a different type of person that came here to hash out a country with their bare hands.
Okay, I'm gonna disagree with you here.
Mhm.
I think the people who come here now, not all, I'm not gonna look. Someone murders someone in this country, they do that. They should be deported to their own country. They should be arrested. They should be in prison. Whatever crimes fit that punishment. All right, I'm never gonna defend that. But if someone comes to this country because they want to have a better life for their kids, then there's nothing wrong. I'm not saying nothing wrong with them being here. Obviously, they have to be healthy, and I understand that if they're not healthy, it's going to be a drain on the system. But you know what? By and large, they're coming to benefit their system. I've known many illegal immigrants, and a lot of them are the hardest working people you will ever meet.
Unquestionable.
And the thing is, when we villainize them, you're villainizing people who really don't have a voice, who don't have the ability to fully speak up, and they're also terrified to speak up. Like I know that there's been a mass exodus going backwards to the border in the last month or two because people are afraid that when Trump comes in, they're going to be hurt, they're going to be killed, they're going to be separated from their children. Because realistically, Trump separated families the first time around. I mean, we forget about the fact that we did it, but he basically was no better than like doing the pogroms or doing some of the stuff that Hitler did. And I'm not saying he did it on the same level, but the scary thing is he separated children from their parents, and there were children who died in the jails he created for children because they were not set up properly.
Well, so do you remember the kids in cages debate with Obama?
Vaguely.
So see, it's amazing that we have short-term memory loss with a lot of these political issues. So Obama was building,
I voted for Biden.
he was trying to expand the processing facilities so that we can bring in more people safely and
Yeah.
properly. Okay. And that's where there was he's building kids in cages, and there has to be sections of processing. You get fingerprinted, you go to this process. You get health checked, you go to this process. Yeah. So you're going to be sitting in a caged room or some sort of divider. A fence is the cheapest. A chain link fence is the cheapest way to separate a room or whatever. But the point is that
the fact that you divide kids from their parents.
Well, that's where sometimes there are some complications with that, especially, like I'd be interested to see if there's enough support for a constitutional amendment that states that in order to be a naturalized citizen born here, one of your biological parents needs to be a citizen in order for you to automatically be a citizen. It'll be a very touchy debate. But the whole point of being born here, automatically being a citizen, was to populate this country because we needed natural defense. We needed people to be citizens to fight against what? And why was the Constitution written in this country? To stand up against tyranny, right? So if you're being ruled by a tyrannous government, and you as the citizens of that country decide to get together and fight that tyranny and start your own thing, by writing a Declaration of Independence and by writing a constitution and forming your own experiment in self-governance, which is what this constitutional republic, right?
This test of democracy.
Test of democracy. It's interesting how we would term that, because it is a constitutional republic. It's not really it's not populism. It's not democracy per se. So populism, everybody seems to be against, and yet everybody thinks their voice should count. But yeah, it's cool. So that's could be into a long form debate on some of the actual citizenship or whatnot. But at some point, if you're living in a country that's messed up, do you have an obligation to stand together and fight against that system and make a better place for yourself? And if you should try to do that, or maybe we can assist people with that in some ways, not necessarily the same ways we're assisting Ukraine or different areas like that. Because
let's go into 2021. They tried to do a revolution because of the fact that they didn't like what happened with the election.
Who's they?
The maggots who tried to invade Congress.
Okay.
They didn't like the election result. By the way, there was no evidence whatsoever of any fraud. Multiple checks on this. Multiple checks. And by the way, you have recordings between Donald Trump and the Secretary of State of Georgia, who is a Republican, where he's saying, change the numbers, and the guy's saying no.
Yeah.
And he basically, I'm sorry. After that, and I'm sorry, I might be lumping you in because I don't know what you voted for. After that, I don't understand how anyone in this country could vote. And my mother-in-law voted for him. I know my aunt and uncle. My uncle called me after the election this last year, and he said, "Hey, I'm going to get you an honorary Trump watch the day after the election." I'm like, seriously? You just destroyed democracy in this country. Because, that's what Trump did. I understand. If you flip side, you were talking about, I understand why people voted for him. Because you know what? Kamala Harris was probably not the best choice. I mean, I think there are better Democratic choices than her. That said, voting for that man is an absolute horrible thing that's happening to democracy. And that's what I don't like, is that I think he is the worst person in history for that job. And he proved it last time by not even telling people about COVID and denying it for 3 months and letting it get out of control to the point where we had to do the shutdown. I mean, when he lost the election, which he lost in a fair and true election, which was decided by the people, he decided that he didn't like that result from the election, and he was okay telling his supporters, I don't like this election, do what you want, when they're 100 feet away from the Capitol building. And basically didn't stop them, didn't call in the National Guard. He didn't necessarily say it in those words because he's smart enough not to say it, but he basically did everything possible to incite them to be mad and rush it and try and even, there were people who died on that day who didn't need to die, and I'm saying that on both sides because of what he does. And I think that's the problem. And then you know what? He incites so much violence, so much hatred, that I can't support someone like that. It's that's where I get really frustrated.
Makes sense, but unfortunately, the media and the way that things were portrayed is not fair and balanced. So there's a problem with mainstream media in reporting facts and not.
What facts did they not report? In this case,
so again, if we could come back another time maybe and talk, because I mean I can answer for sure and give you my quick thought on it, but if you really got to roll, but there is a legal process to question things, and there's also a lot of lawyers in this country, right? We all know that,
yes,
and there's a lot of ways to interpret different laws and different ways that things are supposed to be done legally. Yeah. And so you can have one side that is in your ear saying, no, this is constitutional and you can do this. And other people would say, no, absolutely, that's not constitutional. Yeah. So the process would say that it would have to go to the Supreme Court, or there's a process to figure out what is or is not legal in all those sorts of circumstances. But there is a potential that there was theory that contesting the election, and if you were shown the election,
I don't argue his right to contest.
Mm-hmm.
I argue for his actions after he contested it. When he decided to tell his supporters, "This is not," and I forgot the exact words, so please, I'm misquoting here. But when he decides to basically tell his supporters, "This is a crime. This is bad. Oh, they're crooks. I can't believe what they're doing in Congress." That's not right, and I'd have to get his exact speech.
Yeah, so there's a lot of different stories that may be considered election interference from both sides. Just like you said, I'm a lifelong Democrat. My father was blue-blooded union member. You know, you always just vote straight Democratic. That was the only way, and I've always grown up that way. And from the DNC side of planning, how they couldn't have screwed this up anymore if they tried. Did they try? You know, then you could get into, you know, just craziness and conspiracy theories with some of that stuff. But the idea of Hillary taking out Bernie, because we know that was a promise made prior to Obama. So they said, let Obama go first. You're our horse next time, guaranteed. Then Sanders came out of nowhere. And then if they manipulated polling and data and different things to not select Sanders through the Democratic process because of a promise made to Hillary, I think that rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. And regardless of, my mother was a Hillary supporter, 100%, probably still is. Yeah. How dare you not want to vote for a woman? Like I'm some misogynistic pig. I'm like, it has nothing to do whether it's a woman or not, because at that time, Elizabeth Warren was a rock star talking about education and student loans and different things and processes. So there was a lot of people, Tulsi Gabbard, some of these other people that I would vote for a woman in a second.
Yeah.
And so we're gonna roll.
So we could wrap up. Sorry.
No, that's awesome. I first of all, we have a few gifts. We always do. There's a episode number 7 engraved challenge coin that is part of the Flipside Frolic gift package. We got some poker chips. If you want a hat, we'll get you a hat. But for anybody listening, your main focus now is property investment, and there could be, if you have questions, general contracting, those sorts of things. Let people know where they can find you, or what you got going on. Any of your books that were out there, or social media accounts.
So, well, one, and I didn't even talk about this, but we have a meetup that we do for people who've ever read Rich Dad Poor Dad. We do cash flow game. Actually, we're doing one this coming Saturday, January 25th, but we do it once a month. So if you go to meetup.com, Chicago Cash Flow Group, you could find information about our cash flow group. That's a great way to meet me in person, meet other investors, discover a little bit more about the process. The other thing is, if you're looking to learn about the contracting business, go to creativesmartcontractors.com. Again, creativesmartcontractors.com, and I could send you the link if you need it.
Sure.
And the investment company, we do have a link, but we don't really use it that much. So the website's, I'd rather just, if you want to talk, we can talk.
Okay.
So that's probably the best way. And then you could find me on pretty much any social media channel, except for TikTok right now, because they're not around.
Yeah, we didn't even get to cover that at all. Yeah. It's an interesting one.
Yeah, that's so TikTok just went down this morning. Sorry. We'll see if it's around by the time this episode comes out.
Well, this should come out maybe even later today or tomorrow, because I do have some time. So I will do that. And I was supposed to have another one Saturday that didn't happen. So I thought I was going to be backed up a little bit on post-production. We'll see how our little hiccup needs a little additional editing. I create my own problems sometimes. There was a file thing on the last one. It took me almost 2 weeks to put the episode up, just because, you get some little glitch thing, and
just let me know.
But
share it.
Yeah, we'll get it out. And man, I appreciate it. It's been fun, and we'll do it again, because we definitely have. We could have went 6 hours easy for sure, and that's how these things roll. It's amazing.
My wife told me no. 6 hours.
No, yeah, no, 3. But
3, yeah,
but
yeah.
you could, but again, you can always come back and do another one or whatever, and we can cover different areas. I appreciate you and appreciate you coming out.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks, homie.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for joining us at Flipside Frolic. We hope you enjoyed the conversation and maybe learned a little something about other people's perspectives. Don't forget to subscribe, share, and throw us a like on the video. Comment if you have any questions, and we'll see you on the next episode.